Chapter 19. Kale was at the end of the raid. Due to the massive blood loss from being shot and the long period of continuous combat, he had long exceeded the limits of his body. After relaxing, he quickly fainted. Fry asked a few soldiers to bring Kale and the rescued girl back to the temporary camp for emergency treatment, while he led the remaining 90 soldiers to continue the raid. Due to the large-scale explosion caused by Kale, the large base's defensive mechanisms and organizational systems had long been riddled with holes. Hundreds of surviving German soldiers had lost the command of their commanding officer. They had wanted to rescue the injured soldiers in the explosion area, but at this time, they were suddenly attacked by a fully armed and in good condition American troops. They were immediately defeated. The war lasted from late at night to 5 in the morning. The sky was white, and Fry led the troops to clean up the large base. Even though it was a one-sided battle, they still lost 27 soldiers. But the results were heaven-defying. Coupled with Kale's personal achievements, their troops had wiped out about 1,200 German soldiers in the raid mission and completely occupied the other side's large military base. This was the first time that the American troops had achieved such a magnificent result in a battle. Of course, Kale didn't know any of this. He had been unconscious for a whole week. When he woke up, it was already the morning of the 8th day. Kale opened his eyes and found himself lying on a large white hospital bed. His left shoulder was completely bandaged to his waist, and his wrist was connected to an infusion tube. In addition, various medical instruments were connected to his naked upper body. It was just a shot. Was it that bad? Kale smiled bitterly. He also realized that he had been unconscious for a long time. After all, during the period of unconsciousness, his mind was trapped in the card space. But now, he felt very energetic. His body should have recovered by about 70 to 80%. Pulling the infusion tube and the instruments apart, Kale pressed the wound on his left shoulder with his hand. He could still feel a faint pain, but his back comfortably leaned against the headboard. The tables on both sides of the bed were filled with flowers and fruits. A breeze blew the gauze curtains. Through the window, he could see the blue sky and the forest. The environment outside was very quiet and peaceful. Where am I being transported to? Kale was confused. This was clearly not the frontline war zone or the training base. But who cares, it doesn't matter where it is. Anyway, I'm still alive and healthy. Kyle, who had an amazing ability to accept food, felt a little hungry. He immediately picked up the apple on the table and stuffed it into his mouth. He crunched it into his stomach to alleviate the hunger that surged up in his heart. When Kale picked up the third apple, the door to the ward was suddenly opened. He bit the apple in his hand and looked up instinctively. He couldn't help but be stunned by what he saw. What appeared in front of Kale was an angelic, exquisite face. Her large eyes were blue and clear, her lips were pink and tender, and her bright golden hair was slightly curled and draped over her shoulders. The young girl was wearing a sky-blue knee-length dress. Her immature body outlined a graceful curve, and her exposed arms were slender and fair. This was the second top European beauty that Kale had seen since his rebirth. The first was Carter from the training base. However, Carter gave people a mature and cold beauty charm, while the young girl in front of him was more of a cute and moving beauty. The young girl saw Kale biting the apple and was slightly stunned. Then, like a rabbit, she excitedly shouted outside the door, "Doctor, doctor! Kale is awake!" So it's her. Kale was stunned. Hearing this familiar voice, he recognized that the young girl was the one that he rescued from the German base. It was really too dark at that time and he couldn't see clearly. Plus, the young girl's face was pale and her body was tied up very badly. Compared to now, she was like a completely different person. Hey, you can't eat the apple like this. You have to peel it." After the young girl informed the doctor, she quickly returned to the ward and snatched half of the apple from Kale's hand. "Why are you here?" Kale just opened his mouth and realized that he asked the wrong question. He quickly changed his words and asked, "Well, where am I?" The young girl replied, "We are in the United States' first military hospital in New York. You are in the temporary base at the front line for emergency treatment. After your condition stabilized, you were sent here by helicopter for rehabilitation. So that's how it is." Kale nodded thoughtfully. "You don't know. That bullet didn't just hit your left shoulder. It was only a few centimeters away from your heart. I was really scared during the emergency treatment. Fortunately, your body is very strong and superior," the young girl said as she approached Kale and reached out to adjust his white bandage. "What are you doing?" Kale looked at her in surprise. At this distance, he could faintly smell the fragrance of her blonde hair. "Helping you change the bandage. My parents are both doctors and nurses. I'm still very good at this kind of small thing." The young girl said this and a sad expression appeared on her face. Kale naturally understood. Since she was a captive, her family and friends in the area should have been shot by the invading German army. Sensing the tense atmosphere, Kale forced himself to find a topic to talk about. That, I didn't expect you to know how to take care of people." "Of course. You have to understand that you risked your life to save more than a group of supplies from the enemy base." The young girl stuck out her pink tongue. Perhaps it was because she remembered the scene of being tied up on Kale's back that night, her face blushed a little. "Also, I have a name, Lucy Jane. You can call me Lucy." "Got it." Kale smiled and let Lucy gently and skillfully change the bandage on his wound. Soon, the doctor in charge, who was also the deputy director, rushed into the ward and checked Kale's injury. "Doctor, how is he?" Lucy asked nervously. "He's fine." The doctor in charge smiled, pushed up his glasses, and said to Kale, "I really didn't expect this. Normal people would have to lie in bed for a month, but you've basically recovered in a week. In about 3 more days, you can be officially discharged." 3 more days. Kale shrugged helplessly. In other people's eyes, his physique was at the top level, but in his eyes, it was really weak. The doctor in charge confirmed that the injury was fine and left the ward. Before he left, he said, "Oh right. An officer asked me to inform him when you wake up. I already called him just now. He'll probably come here to visit soon." "An officer came to visit?" Kale scratched his head. It wasn't hard to guess. He knew less than 10 officers, and only 1 or 2 were close. After a while, when the officer knocked on the door and walked in, Kale showed an expression that said he had guessed correctly, but he still pretended to be surprised and asked, "Officer Joseph, why are you here?" That's right, the officer who came to visit him was the combat instructor who let Kale draw a few green physique cards from the training base. "Brat, why can't I come?" Officer Joseph laughed and scolded without putting on airs, but when he saw that Lucy was also in the ward, he coughed and became serious. "Oh, so there's a family member here?" Chapter 20. Cut the crap. "Sir, what are you doing here?" "I'm injured right now, so I can't practice with you." Kale also casually teased Joseph, who had a good relationship with him. "Brat, you're really amazing. You've made our training base proud." Just like before, Commander Joseph changed the topic halfway through his words, and the original scolding turned into praise. "I've heard about you. You went to the front line and became a corporal in just 3 days. You obtained important information about the enemy's camp, led a 100-men unit, and went deep into the enemy's camp alone." Commander Joseph gave a thumbs up as he spoke. "You're really something. Do you know how important this counterattack was to our army? You destroyed a large enemy base, 3 medium-sized camps, and 1 middle-sized camp. The situation at the front line was reversed. All the military units, and even the whole country, went crazy about this perfect counterattack. As the biggest contributor to this counterattack, you're a national hero, and the idol of all the soldiers now. Because of this, it also caused a craze for young people to join the army. Compared to being promoted to corporal in 3 days, Kale really became famous in one battle. Don't praise me like that, I'll be proud. Kale chuckled, and his young and handsome face was full of confidence. Captain America, who had the physique of a super soldier, was able to shine during World War II, and he had the more versatile and powerful card draw system. How difficult would it be for him to become an American hero? However, with this battle, his reputation in the army had greatly increased, which was a little beyond Kale's expectations. Kale blinked and asked Joseph with slight expectation, "Oh right, I made such a great contribution. Did the commander above give me a promotion or something?" "You little brat, you're already a corporal, and you're still thinking about your military rank." Commander Joseph blew on his beard with dissatisfaction and said with a straight face, "Military merits have to be accumulated step by step. The most important thing is to defeat Germany and defend the country. However, you did make a great contribution in this counterattack, and your military rank was promoted a little bit." Kale heard the main point from these words and asked, "How much is a little bit?" "See for yourself." Commander Joseph didn't seem to want to say more. He took out a soldier's ID from his uniform pocket and threw it over. Kale quickly took it and opened it. It was indeed a new personal soldier's ID, and there was a black and white photo of him when he joined the army. Kale Doff, male, 22 years old, U.S. Navy lieutenant. It's actually a lieutenant? Kyle was shocked. This wasn't just a little bit, it was a huge jump. From corporal to lieutenant, there was a difference of 2 ranks. In other words, it was a jump of 3 ranks. Kyle had jumped 3 ranks when he was promoted from a private to a corporal, but that was still the rank of a corporal, the lowest military rank. And this time, he had jumped to a genuine military officer position. "Commander Joseph, you seem to be a lieutenant yourself, right?" Kale looked at Joseph with a strange expression. He suddenly understood why the other was unhappy. "Are you happy now? You don't have to call me commander anymore." Joseph clenched his teeth. 2 weeks ago, he was still a soldier under his command, and in the blink of an eye, he was in the same position as him. "You dare to think about it?" Joseph grumbled like a resentful wife, "I used 10 years to slowly climb up to the rank of lieutenant, and you only used less than 10 days. You're really giving me face. Something's not right. No matter how many military merits I have, one battle shouldn't be enough for me to be promoted to lieutenant, right?" Kale asked doubtfully. There were many conspiracy theories floating in his mind. "That's why I said you encountered a once-in-a-100-years opportunity." Joseph sighed and explained, "Right now is the chaotic period of World War II. The country urgently needs to set an example to motivate the youth to join the army and increase the morale of the army. And you just happened to take the initiative to stand up, so the rank of lieutenant was naturally given to you." Joseph paused and said with a smile, "You're not like Captain America. You're not a fake title that relies on promoting movies and singing and dancing to show off. You're a hero's halo won by your real strength and achievements. Captain America." Kale was shocked and asked urgently, "Is it Steve?" "Yes." Joseph took out a cut-out New York Daily from his pocket and said indignantly, "After the success of the super soldier experiment, that kid's physique has indeed undergone amazing changes. But he didn't go to the battlefield. Instead, he went with those politicians every day to make some kind of military propaganda movie, and sang and danced to raise funds for debt prevention. He created a righteous reputation for himself as Captain America." Kale quickly took the newspaper, and Lucy helped him spread it out. The two of them looked at it. On the front side of the newspaper, there was a black and white photo that occupied a large part of the paper. Inside was a tall and strong young man wearing a blue and white striped tights with a righteous face. "If you buy an E-Series debt prevention voucher, the soldiers on the battlefield will have one more bullet. who is strong and brave enough to save the United States from the fire and water, quickly follow the call of Captain America and join our battle. This kind of English banner was printed in bold above the headline and subheadline of the newspaper. It's really Steve. Cale smiled. From the tall young man in the newspaper, he could vaguely see the weak shadow of the past. Captain America, Marvel's first artificial hero, finally appeared. Although at first, it appeared in this funny way of political propaganda. Joseph. I shouldn't have a mission now, right? I haven't seen Steve for 2 weeks. I want to see him. I hope you can help me. Cale eagerly looked at Joseph and forcibly suppressed his inner sense of expectation. The ability card of the super soldier must be drawn as soon as possible. He had enough of being limited to the top level of human physique. So it's like this. Joseph frowned. He personally was very disgusted with Steve, but since this request was made by Cale, he had no reason to refuse. Joseph could only nod and agree. Let's do it this way. Steve is not in New York now, but he is traveling around the United States to promote. But in 2 days, he will hold a publicity speech at the training base. I will also return. I will come in advance to pick you up. Okay, I can still afford to wait for these 2 days. Cale nodded in agreement, his hands quietly clenched into fists. Chapter 21. At noon in the first military hospital of the United States. Due to the time of war, there were many wounded officers and soldiers in the hospital, as well as many family members who came to visit. However, because it was a military hospital, everyone here was very well behaved and kept their voices low for fear of disturbing others. Cale wore a patient's exclusive uniform and walked through the hospital's lobby corridor. His young and handsome face immediately attracted the attention of many opposite sex. Thanks to the current information dissemination was not as crazy as in the 21st century, few people recognized that Cale was the biggest contributor to the recent counterattack campaign. In fact, Cale, the youngest lieutenant in the United States, was not even as famous as Steve, who was promoted as Captain America. In the face of the nurses who were constantly looking at him, Cale responded with a smile instead of a response. He stepped out of the hospital building and came to the green park outside. At this time, the sun was shining brightly, the trees and grass were green, and the pool and fountain were shining brightly. It was very pleasing to the eye and was suitable for rest. Of course, Cale wasn't the kind of person who would wait patiently. He took a few deep breaths of natural fresh air and began to warm up his muscles and bones. It was a set of formal military boxing. After a set, his bones were so comfortable that they were crackling like beans. His blood was flowing, and his stiff and slow body looked much rosier. Comfortable. Cale exhaled a breath of hot air. Although his left shoulder that had not fully recovered was in pain, for him who was used to the combat environment, it was much more comfortable than lying on the hospital bed. He would go to the training base with Joseph tomorrow. He did not want to look so tired. Since he promised to walk in front of Steve, of course, everything would be perfect. Without knowing when, Cale had his own pride and principles. Oh yeah, I almost forgot about the loot from the counterattack campaign. After sweating, Cale sat on a chair in the park and closed his eyes as if he was resting. His mind quietly entered the card space. Compared to the previous campaign, the huge white space did not have a large number of messy white and green item cards. However, the loot this time was greater than any previous campaign. There were only 25 blue item cards that had not been categorized and stored. They were placed above the center of the card vortex. Every piece of paper was a cube with unlimited energy, which could give the modified guns and cannons astonishing destructive power. However, when Cale saw the blue-grade infinite energy cube, he had already figured out what to use it for. Rather than using these energy sources to expend on the guns and cannons, it would be better to use them as materials for the sacrificial card draw. 2 blue cards from the sacrificial draw. Even if I don't draw a card that exceeds the blue grade, at least there are 2 blue cards that can greatly improve my personal strength. Kyle was full of expectations as he suspended the 25 blue item cards in front of the mental incarnation. The difference between the lower limit and the upper limit of the sacrificial draw card was outrageous. Because there was the possibility of drawing anything, sometimes it was a huge loss, and sometimes it could bring you unexpected gains. The stealth blue ability card was the best product of the sacrificial draw card. If he didn't have the stealth ability, Kale wouldn't even be able to touch the entrance of the enemy base, let alone break into it alone. New York's goddess of victory bless me. Give me some luck. I must get something good. Kale felt as if he had returned to the lottery in the game in his previous life. He was excited and nervous as he first sacrificed 10 blue item cards. Sacrificial draw. You've sacrificed gem energy, x10. Draw successful. Congratulations on obtaining the Blue Eagle. A blue card that was obviously a biology type appeared in front of Kale's eyes. The blue light on the card was dazzling, indicating that it was an extraordinary grade. It's my first time and I've already gotten a blue rare card? Kale didn't think that his luck would explode. He had already hit the jackpot to be able to draw a blue rare card. He quickly took the new card and checked it out. Blue Eagle, a strange flying creature that lives on a 10,000-meter cliff. Blue rare card. Its size is 3 times larger than a normal goshawk. Its wingspan is up to 10 meters. Its feathers are dark blue. Its vitality and defense are outstanding. It can withstand attacks from normal firearms. Its vision is up to 10,000 meters. It can emit a sonic attack. Its highest flying speed is Mach 4. Its carrying capacity is halved. A flying rare mount? Kale was stunned. If this was an online game, this would be a rare mount exclusive to rich people. In the world of Marvel, this Blue Eagle could already be classified as an alien monster. Its fastest speed can reach Mach 4. That's even faster than a fighter jet. Kale pondered. He really liked the Blue Eagle. Unfortunately, its special existence meant that he couldn't use it normally. He could guess that he was now sitting on the Blue Eagle and flying in the real world. Or he could directly summon the Blue Eagle to kill enemies. He would probably be killed by his own country's fighter jets or be captured and dissected by a group of biologists. In terms of practicality, the blue rare, Blue Eagle, was probably not as good as the green rare, Poisonous Hornet's Nest. I'll leave it for now. It can still be useful in a specific environment in the future. After all, this is the first rare blue card in my life. Kale comforted himself. He listed the Blue Eagle in the space area for emergency use so that it would be convenient for emergency use. Next, it was the second time to sacrifice the card. After this time, the remaining 5, gem energy, cards were not enough to draw anymore. Please, give me a more practical card. Kyle didn't forget to pray. Now he understood that the most important thing about a card was its practicality. A card that was suitable for use at the moment was the best card. You have sacrificed gem energy, x10. Draw successful. Congratulations on obtaining vibranium bracers. Vibranium, good stuff. Kale's nervous face was filled with excitement when he heard the name of the new card. After all, as long as it had the prefix of vibranium, it couldn't be that bad. Vibranium was the top material in the world of Marvel. It originated from Wakanda, the hidden country of the Black Panther. In the current outside world, only the shield that Captain America would hold in the future was made of vibranium. Kale excitedly grabbed the new item card in his hand and looked at the attributes in detail. Vibranium bracers, right arm bracers made of pure vibranium. Blue item card. It can perfectly accommodate the right arm of the holder and can easily offset all kinds of physical damage and the impact of firearms. Isn't this equivalent to the right-hand part of the Black Panther suit? It's just missing the claws. Kale was satisfied. Although it wasn't an ability card, it was the black technology equipment that he needed very much now. Chapter 22. The next morning. After eating breakfast at the hospital early, Cale changed into a brand new military uniform that Joseph had sent over. It also had a badge with the rank of lieutenant on it. Lucy paid more attention to Cale's appearance than he did himself. She tidied up the collar and sleeves of the uniform and carefully smoothed out the creases with her hands. "I'm not going to a celebrity banquet. There's no need to be so gentlemanly, right?" Cale teased. Lucy seemed to have something on her mind as she remained silent and didn't respond. "What's wrong? Did someone bully you?" Cale continued. Lucy seemed to have mustered up her courage as she nervously asked back, "Brother Cale, are you going back to the battlefield with that big bearded officer later?" "The battlefield isn't that fast. The mission hasn't been given out yet. I'm just going to the recruit base where I trained before." Cale looked at her and said with a smile, "What's wrong? Even if you're an officer, it's normal to go to the battlefield now." "Then can I go with you?" Lucy lowered her head and squeezed her little hands together. Cale said with a straight face, "Lucy, do you think the battlefield is a fun place? Have you forgotten how you escaped? But my family died on the battlefield. My home is gone. If even you leave, then I'll..." Lucy said as tears appeared in her beautiful big eyes. "That's a problem." Cale rubbed his chin and thought for a bit before saying, "Got it. My home was originally here in New York, but my parents died in the previous war. It's empty now. If you don't mind, you can live there first." He had seen his own files at the training base and knew that he was an orphan before he joined the army. He lived in a retro villa left behind by his deceased parents. The house keys were all kept in a depository in New York and could be taken out with an identification card. "Live at your home?" Lucy's eyes widened, and her fair and pretty face was dyed pink. Kyle's words had another layer of meaning in her ears. Wasn't this cohabitation in advance? Although the other party wasn't often at home. "You can stay as long as you want." Cale smiled and stroked Lucy's golden hair lovingly. For the time being, he didn't have any other thoughts about Lucy. He only treated her as a younger sister. "Brother Cale, you're so good to me." Lucy's eyebrows were full of joy. She quickly stood on her tiptoes and kissed Cale's cheek. Then, like a frightened rabbit, she ran out of the room with a red face. This is really..." A subtle feeling arose spontaneously. Cale touched the cheek that had been kissed and quickly threw this matter to the back of his mind. Now was not the time to talk about feelings. He must continue to become stronger, strong enough to face all the unexpected crises in this world. Accumulating military merits, promotion, and getting a certain amount of prestige and power, and even wealth, there were still many things waiting for Cale to work hard. After being reborn as a marvel, if he only wanted to be an ordinary person, it would be a waste of the ability to draw cards given by God. Cale had his own blueprint for life and was waiting to add color to it. Around 8:00 in the morning. Joseph personally drove the jeep to pick up Cale and take him to the military airport. Cale said goodbye to Lucy in New York and then boarded the helicopter with Joseph and returned to the initial training base. At this time, on the other side of the training base, the military set up a speech stage in the open space of the square. Steve, as Captain America, was going to give a speech, but there were political factors. The commander of the base issued an order early on to force all the soldiers in the training camp to listen to the speech on the square on time. Whoever did not go would be expelled from the military. What was intriguing was that except for the soldiers, no officers attended the speech. Because not only the soldiers, but all the officers sneered at Steve, who had never been to the battlefield but claimed to be Captain America. It was conceivable that Steve, wearing a tights with the United States logo, was bound to be strongly resisted by the soldiers. In fact, this was indeed the case. "Are you ready to go with me to fix Hitler?" Steve stood on the podium, facing the silence of the audience. He wanted to warm the atmosphere and said to the hundreds of soldiers below, "Well, are there any volunteers?" "Nonsense. What are we doing here if there are no volunteers?" A soldier below the stage shouted impatiently, and suddenly all the soldiers sitting on the square roared with laughter. "We want to see the girls dance." In the face of the laughter of the soldiers, Steve responded awkwardly, "I think they will only sing one song later, so I'll think about what to do with the extra time." "Get out of here. Little fairy, you should dance in boots." The soldiers below the stage did not give him any face at all and became more and more noisy. Some soldiers began to throw the fruit or water bottles in their hands directly on the stage. Carter at the back of the stage clenched her fists and wanted to help Steve out, but there was no way. "Please, don't be like this, I used to be a training soldier here." Steve had no choice but to use the decorative props in his hand as a shield to block the debris that was constantly thrown under the stage. "What are you doing?" A cold and powerful voice suddenly came from the back of the square. Suddenly, all the soldiers on the square looked back in surprise. They saw a young man in a military uniform standing behind the soldiers at some point in time. He had a faint majestic aura, and his sharp and cold eyes looked at the soldiers. "It's Lieutenant, sir." The soldier who was about to refute noticed the military rank symbol on the young man's chest and swallowed his saliva in disbelief. "Such a young lieutenant officer? Why haven't I heard of him? He shouldn't be older than us, right?" In the nervous whispers of many soldiers, some soldiers seemed to have recognized the young man's identity and said loudly with a complicated expression, "It's Kale, Lieutenant Kale." "Lieutenant Kale?" Many of the recruits were slightly stunned, and their eyes became fanatical when they looked at the young officer again. Hey, is it really him?" "Nonsense. Such a young lieutenant, who else could it be other than Kale? Oh my God. American hero, he's my idol. Who isn't? I joined the army because of his deeds." The soldiers on the square were so excited that they could not speak. In the end, someone took the lead and shouted, "Stand up and salute." Suddenly, hundreds of soldiers stood up in unison and turned to salute the young man. "Good morning, sir. Thank you for your hard work, sir." In the face of their worship, Kale at the back responded coldly, "No need to salute, I was just one of you 2 weeks ago. But is this how you treat my brother? Is this the only quality of a soldier?" The soldiers looked at each other and finally gritted their teeth. They collectively reacted quickly and turned around again, bowing and apologizing to Steve on the stage. "Sorry." Steve on the stage did not say anything. He looked at the cold young man standing behind the soldiers, and his heart was really excited and ashamed. He suddenly remembered the sunset scene after Kale won the shooting competition at the training base. Chapter 23. Kale's arrival instantly became the focus of the training base. The youngest lieutenant officer, the American hero, these titles are enough to make every recruit relish and upgrade it to a hot topic to chat about. And now, the rumored real person is here, more attractive than idols or dancers. Steve took the opportunity to get away, retreated to the backstage, and replaced a group of dancers in short skirts to smooth things over. However, the soldiers in the square were still in high spirits and still couldn't stop, looking around, trying to find Kale's figure that had disappeared from the field. At this moment, backstage of the speech stage. Steve. Kale. The two handsome young men ignored the strange eyes of the backstage staff and laughed and hugged each other, which was a unique intimate action of the two. Kale was still smiling, while Steve's excited face was overflowing with joy, happy like a child. "Don't use so much force, the gunshot wound on my left shoulder hasn't completely healed." Kale laughed and looked at the tall and powerful Steve in front of him, stretched out his fist and punched his strong chest, and said with emotion, "I didn't expect you to be much taller than before, even taller than me." He was only 180 centimeters, while Steve was now 188 centimeters, taller by half a head. This is the effect of the super soldier serum. I'm much stronger than I look now. Steve did not hide the slightest. Sadness appeared on his righteous face, and said regretfully, unfortunately, the professor was shot by a spy of the Hydro organization, and the only super soldier serum sample was robbed and destroyed. Otherwise, it's okay. Kale shrugged and said indifferently, even if there is no super soldier serum, I don't care. After all, I still have the card draw. Kale secretly said in his heart. Right. Kale, what happened to your right hand? Steve's surprised eyes fell on Kale's right hand. The military uniform was a long-sleeved coat, but Kale's right hand and palm were now tightly wrapped in white bandages. Kale lifted his tightly wrapped vibranium arm and casually made an excuse. This is a little bruise from the previous battle. Surprise counterattack battle. Steve's eyes lit up and he said excitedly, I've heard about your record. You must tell me about the scene at that time. For Steve, a Patriot War maniac full of righteous beliefs, has not been on the battlefield with real guns and bullets, which really stifled him. This is also what Kale wants, so he readily agreed. No problem, let's find a place to have lunch. After that, Kale's gaze shifted to Carter behind Steve. The mature woman, who always maintained her cool, was like a rose with thorns, with an aura that kept strangers away. Kale teased, Agent Carter is also here. That's great, let's go have lunch together. I've said a long time ago that I want to repay you. Carter originally wanted to coldly refuse, but for some reason, she hesitated and said, then let's go. Is that a yes? We're brothers catching up, and you're really going? Kale was a little confused for a moment. He thought that someone as cold as Carter would definitely refuse. But since it was already like this, he could only let nature take its course. 10 minutes later, in the cafeteria of the training base. At the table in the middle area, Kale sat on one side, while Steve and Carter sat side by side on the other side. The atmosphere was strange for the three of them to have a meal. Big brother Kale, are we eating here? Steve looked at the hodgepodge on his plate hesitantly. It wasn't that he disliked it, but he was thinking about the person next to him. Kale was probably the only one who dared to invite Carter to the soldiers' cafeteria for lunch. You know, the training base here is close to the frontline area of the Italian territory. If you want to eat in a cafeteria, even if you take a helicopter, you can only rush there for dinner. Kale smiled and said, why, didn't you eat there often before? I'm fine, but... Steve's eyes hinted at Carter, who was silent next to him. Oh, right. Chef, add a big drumstick for our beautiful Carter. Kale directly shouted at the cafeteria chef. Steve, Carter was also silent for a while before she began to eat the hodgepodge lunch on her plate with a spoon. Steve had just eaten a few mouthfuls when he couldn't help but say, Kale, tell me about the counterattack campaign. I heard that due to the wrong information, you were facing the large German base with 100 people. That's right. At that time, as a newly promoted corporal, I and another sergeant led 100 people and accepted the surprise attack mission. Kale began to talk about the situation of the campaign, but his mind was secretly locked onto Steve, who was right in front of him. In just an instant, only Kale could see that hundreds of cards of different colors appeared from the back of Steve's head and quickly floated and rotated around him. Car driving proficiency, English proficiency, military boxing proficiency, pistol proficiency, sniper proficiency, true shield strike proficiency. White and green cards were densely packed into Kale's vision. Compared to 2 weeks ago, when he only had the initial 4 white ability cards, Steve had also achieved the same level of metamorphosis now. Of course, the number of cards itself wasn't the main point. Kale had as many white and green ability cards as he wanted. Kale's gaze quickly fell on Steve's head. There was an unparalleled dark blue ability card floating there, emitting light that easily crushed the rest of the hundreds of ability cards. Super Soldier, obtain the perfect physique that humans can achieve. Rare Blue Ability Card. A qualitative change triggered from the human body's genes. Increase the physique to the theoretical threshold of perfection for humans, greatly slowing down the aging of the body, and strengthening the immune system, low-level self-healing, and resistance to attacks. Have the perfect physique of the golden ratio, superb physical fitness, speed, reaction, and intelligence that normal humans can't achieve. Current status, can be drawn. Do you wish to draw? This is the Rare Blue Physique Type Ability Card. Kale's heart surged with uncontrollable excitement. The skill type, potential, ability card, compared to this type of card, was immediately superior. Without hesitation, Kale directly chose to draw. But in the next moment, an unprecedented warning suddenly sounded in his mind. Warning. This card will last for half an hour. Warning. Rare Blue Ability Card can only be drawn once. Warning. Once drawn, it will completely transform the card owner's physique, it can't be changed. Kale's expression changed. The 3 warning messages for drawing cards were carved into his mind like a knife, deeply etched in his heart. Kale, what's wrong with you? Steve saw that Kale had suddenly stopped and couldn't help but ask worriedly. Carter also stared at Kale in surprise. Nothing, I just suddenly remembered the difficult situation of the battle. Kale shook his head and continued to verbally describe the battle scene that hadn't been completed. He didn't think too much and quickly made a choice. Chapter 24. The Super Soldier ability was a must-have. Even if there was a huge restriction, Kale had no reason to give up on drawing. And this restriction only applied to blue rare ability cards. Blue ability cards without rare attributes could still be drawn. However, at the current stage in the world of Marvel, there weren't that many people with super green ability cards and above for him to draw. It was just half an hour of continuous card drawing time. Kale spent a lot of effort to explain the last counterattack to Steve and Carter in detail. Of course. Sneak, ability card, hound, creature card, gem energy, and so on were all omitted. That's how I snuck into the armory of the large base. Who would have thought that I would run into the enemy commander in the basement of the armory? After killing him, I planted a time bomb in the armory. What happened next was simple. I just needed to escape the pursuit of the German soldiers and leave the warehouse to detonate the bomb. Once the base's internal defense mechanism fell, it would be difficult for them to stop the surprise attack of our 100-man army. In order to delay the card drawing time, Kale finished telling the story. He was a little thirsty as he drank some water. Only then did he realize that Steve and Carter were still immersed in the description of the battle just now. Sneaking in alone and destroying the enemy base's defense system with your own strength. That's really exciting. Steve praised as a trace of envy flashed in his eyes. This was the experience that he had been yearning for. Sneaking into the base alone, you really dared to do it. You don't want to live anymore. Carter concluded coldly. I don't know if you've heard of this saying, if you don't have passion, then your life will be bleak. Kale smiled confidently and looked at the 2 people in front of him. He said with certainty, even if I were given another chance to start over, I would still bet my life on the side of rewards and risks. Instead of being the stars that serve as a foil to the moon, it's better to choose to fly across the universe and challenge the sun with light and heat. I don't care what series protagonist you are, I don't care what invincible villain you are. If you block my path, then I'll beat you. As long as I'm here, Marvel has no main characters. This was Kale's life creed in this world. No one could make him submit. Looking at the man whose conviction and aura were incomparably strong, Carter's beautiful eyes couldn't help but reveal a strange emotion. Kale, you're right. Life should be so exciting. Steve quietly clenched his fists as if he had been injected with chicken blood. He was so excited that he could not wait to go to the front line and find a base to fight. Don't worry, gold will always shine. Steve, your strength is genuine. You are absolutely qualified to fight alongside me. I have no doubt about that. Kale said with a smile. After all, as one of the representative heroes of Marvel, Steve, with a shield, was almost equal to anyone. That's right. Carter, you're so close to Steve. Are you too? Kale winked playfully. Carter glanced at him coldly. It's just a job to collect follow-up information on the super soldier. Exactly. Kale, don't talk nonsense. Steve hurriedly waved his hand to clarify. You two are a good match. Are you sure you don't want to think about it? Kale continued. Clang. The spoon was thrown on the iron plate. Carter could not help but stand up from her seat and throw out a sentence, I'm done. Then she walked towards the door of the cafeteria. Steve sighed and complained, Kale, you're too straightforward. I'm creating an opportunity for you. Kale patted him on the shoulder as if for his own good. He motioned to the door. Are you sure you don't want to chase after her? I got it. I'll find you in the afternoon. After being modified by the super soldier serum, Steve's brain was a lot sharper. He reacted quickly and nodded. Then he chased after Carter. After the two left, Kale breathed a sigh of relief. His hand pressed tightly on his chest. His forehead was sweating profusely. Super Soldier, drawn. This rare blue ability card, as soon as it was stored in the card space, occupied the dominant position right above all the cards. At the same time, Kale felt a stabbing pain from the inside out. It made him feel as if he was on a barbecue grill repeatedly. He knew that the physique-type ability card, Super Soldier, had begun to completely modify his genes and physique. I have to find a place to complete the genetic transformation of my physique, Kale muttered to himself. Soon, he thought of a safe and reliable place. At the training base, in the public shower room. As the performance on the stage had not yet ended, there was no one in the shower room at this time. Entering a separate room, Kale took off his clothes and equipment. He turned on the shower and let the cold water pour down from the top of his head. It washed his strong body with various scars. Even so, the stabbing pain and heat in his body were getting stronger. Even his bones were creaking. Something in his body was breaking. Tearing. And then forcefully remodeling. Ugh! Kale's eyes were bloodshot. He materialized the Nepalese army knife and used it as a stress reliever. He bit it hard between his teeth to prevent himself from crying out due to the pain. If there were outsiders around, they would definitely be able to see that Kale's naked body was expanding little by little. It was also shrinking little by little. It was as if it was adjusting to the most ideal appearance. The blue veins were moving and protruding. His muscles were becoming stronger and stronger after the expansion and contraction. The mutation lasted for 3 minutes. Phew! Kale opened his mouth. The army knife fell directly to the ground. There was a row of clear teeth marks on the body of the army knife made of stainless steel. His chest muscles were still beating rapidly, but they had already calmed down. His skin was emitting heat. The wounds and scars that originally existed on it seemed to have been washed away by water. There were no traces of the past left. The transformation was a success. Kale was clearly aware of this because he could feel that his body was filled with a powerful strength that he could not hold in the past. Although the super soldier is the most perfect physique that a human can have, I can't be considered a human now. Kale said to himself. Now, regardless of his age, vitality, the natural aging of his cells, physical strength, learning, memory, and thinking speed, they were all not in the first class of the human definition. It was not an exaggeration to say that he was a humanoid monster. Finally, I have a trump card that can allow me to stand firm in this world. Kale also breathed a sigh of relief. He had relieved a lot of pressure. Although he had the ability to draw cards before, he was still within the definition of a human. He could easily die if he was hit by a bullet. Now, even if he was hit by a bullet, it would only constitute a minor injury. It would not be a life-threatening serious injury. Therefore, the super soldier ability was a big step in the growth of Kale's strength. It was also an indispensable step. After Kale took a shower, he put on his military uniform. Only then did he notice that he had grown a little taller. He was almost 185 centimeters. His physique and abdominal muscles were also a lot stronger. They stretched the clothes and looked more intimidating. Indeed, the poor relied on mutation. Chapter 25. Kale came out of the shower room and found that the sky outside had changed. The sky was covered with dark clouds and it was drizzling. The rain washed the aisle of the training base and made it full of potholes. The scene of this place, coupled with the current timeline, was a bit familiar. Kale was taking shelter from the rain and pondering when he saw a woman hurrying towards him with an umbrella in the rain. She looked around as if she was looking for someone. When he saw the cold face of the person, he couldn't help but exclaim in surprise, "Carter?" "Kale." Carter saw Kale standing under the eaves of the shower room. She didn't care about the wet ground and approached him quickly. "Why aren't you with Steve? What are you doing here in the men's shower room?" Kale was surprised and seemed to have guessed something. He joked, "You don't really like to see the perfect body of a man, do you?" After all, the last time he was a soldier in the training base, Carter broke into the dormitory once. At that time, Kale happened to be taking a shower. However, Carter didn't even refute this time. She said anxiously, "Kale, I came here specifically to find you. Please go and persuade Steve. You're the only one who can persuade him now." "Huh? What are you talking about?" Kale scratched his head in confusion. "I'll tell you on the way. If you don't go now, it'll be too late." Carter grabbed Kale's hand and took him into the rain outside. "Near the military camp tent area." "You mean?" "In the front-line war zone of Austria, the soldiers of the 107th Regiment were raided by the Germans. Only a small number of people escaped back here. And among those missing soldiers, there's a sergeant named Bucky Barnes." After listening to Carter's brief message, Kale suddenly knew why she was so anxious. Bucky Barnes. Steve's best friend before he became a soldier, and the Winter Soldier controlled by Hydra in the future. For his sake, Steve later completely fell out with Iron Man and fought him. Now that he knew that something had happened to Bucky and that the place of the accident was not far away, Steve would definitely risk his life to save him. Then. "Carter. Are you trying to persuade me to stop Steve from going?" Kale asked. Carter answered affirmatively, "Of course. Let's not talk about whether the soldiers who were attacked were still alive. Right now, there wasn't a large force here, so they could launch a rescue operation. It's too dangerous for him to cross Europe's most dangerous war zone and penetrate deep into the enemy's rear factory alone." "I understand." Kale smiled and didn't say anything. This made Carter frown slightly. She had a bad premonition. However, at that moment, the only person who could stop Steve's persistent actions was Kale. The two came to the barracks area, where the tents for the propaganda staff lived. Steve was still wearing the blue and white striped American Star tights and a rainproof Nike jacket. He was preparing to change the spare tire in a Jeep military vehicle. He looked like he was going to set off alone. When Carter came back, Steve hurriedly wanted to say something, but when he saw Kale behind her, his face suddenly became unnatural. "Kale, are you here to persuade me too? I know it's risky, but if I have the ability and don't do it, I will feel guilty for the rest of my life." I haven't said anything yet. How do you know I'm here to persuade you?" Kale shrugged and helped Steve throw the second spare tire into the back of the car. Steve patted Kale's shoulder in surprise, and the two looked at each other and smiled. There was no need to say anything between men. They could read each other's thoughts with just one action. Cale, you? Carter looked at him in disbelief. Wasn't this more of a hindrance than a help? I'll go with him. That shouldn't be a problem, right? It's much safer with two people, Cale said confidently. Carter looked at Steve, then looked at Cale, and said bitterly, don't you understand? This is completely not something that one or two people can do. What would happen when a hothead with a clear goal met another madman who clapped his hands to encourage him? In less than half a minute, Carter announced that she had completely failed to stop them. For the sake of the two of them, she had to secretly use the resources in her hands. 10 minutes later, a plane took off in the thunderstorm, taking advantage of the darkness and rain to go deep into the European war zone. In the plane cabin, Steve and Cale sat on one side, and Carter sat on the other side, explaining the situation to them. The Hydra military camp is in Clausburg, between two mountains, like a factory. I'll try to get the plane as close to the entrance as possible. Stark is the best pilot I've ever seen. Only he dares to take off in this thunderstorm. When Carter said this, in the pilot's seat, a man dressed like a gentleman, about 30 years old, casually waved his hand behind him. Howard Stark? The founder of Stark Industries, and also the father of Iron Man. Cale's eyes lit up slightly. He had wanted to meet this legendary figure in the world of Marvel for a long time. He greeted him and said, "Are you Howard from the Scientific Strategy Bureau? I've seen your scientific inventions at the Natural History Exhibition. They're all works of genius." Lieutenant Cale. Howard replied politely, "I've heard about you a long time ago. You rejected the Super Soldier Project experiment, the solo war maniac, and the title of American hero. If there's a chance, I can treat you to cheese hot pot when we go back. Of course, it would be even better if Agent Carter came along. Then it's a deal," Cale said with a smile. He didn't care about the upcoming danger, as if he was sure that he could return safely and triumphantly. With some cards in hand, he really wanted to have a good relationship with Howard. "Attention, we've entered the enemy-occupied area." Howard gave a rare serious warning and quickly operated the instrument to avoid gunfire. The plane suddenly caused a violent tremor. Through the window, they could clearly see the lightning flashing in the sky outside. In the dark wilderness below, the muzzle flames of the enemy constantly lit up. Natural and man-made attacks were seriously affecting the flight of the plane. "It's too dangerous. Steve and I will go down from here. You guys go back immediately." Cale made a judgment and opened the cabin of the plane. The night wind from 100 meters above suddenly rushed in and opened the windbreaker on his body. "This is also very close to the enemy's factory." Steve nodded and stood side by side with Cale at the hatch. "Steve." Carter stopped him and said slowly, "Please come back alive. Don't worry." Steve comforted her and jumped down first. "With me here, Steve will be fine. When we come back, I'll treat you to a real feast." Cale waved his hand and followed Steve down. In just a few seconds, the two quickly fell and disappeared in the night rain. "Not just Steve, please come back too, Cale." Chapter 26. In the wilderness at night. Violent winds, torrential rain, lightning, thunder, and flying bullets. Cale's face was facing down as he continued to accelerate his descent. The night wind blew against his windbreaker, making it flutter loudly. This time, he had chosen to come with Steve to rescue the troops for two reasons. First, he wanted to test his strength after his transformation. Second, there was a large number of battle achievements and a large number of prizes to draw. There was no reason for him not to come. Not far below, Steve opened his parachute. Cale also estimated the time to open his parachute. He opened the parachute behind him, and the two of them floated down into the wilderness. Da-da-da. They had only descended 20 meters when the enemy soldiers below seemed to have discovered their tracks. They kept firing into the sky. "I'll attract their fire," Steve shouted, as if he was afraid that the bullets would hit Cale. He immediately controlled the parachute to attract the fire and rushed down first. "I still need you to block the bullets." Cale shook his head and smiled. He pulled out the Nepalese army knife from his waist with his left hand and waved it behind him. He actually cut off the parachute rope on his back. They were still more than 10 meters above the ground in the wilderness. Without the buoyancy of the parachute, Cale quickly fell again. Seeing this, not only Steve but also the German soldiers below were stunned. Is that person trying to commit suicide? The German soldiers had just thought of this when they saw Cale roll on the ground after falling from a height of more than 10 meters. He stood up again easily. "My legs are a little numb. But now I can really do something that ordinary people can't do." Cale's cold face showed a hint of a smile. He didn't test it. He just felt that he could do it, so he took the risk and gave it a try. Now, his physical fitness, which was beyond human standards, was like a treasure trove meeting a key, or a sports car meeting a highway, to the hundreds of battle skill cards. The combination of the two caused an unimaginable qualitative change. "What are you waiting for? Shoot!" Several German soldiers were still staring at Cale in a daze. After their leader shouted a reminder, they hurriedly raised their guns and aimed. However, Cale's reaction was faster. Instead of retreating, he moved forward, holding the saber in his left hand as he rushed toward the muzzle of the German soldier. Thud! Cale suddenly stepped to the left, and a pile of bullets brushed past his right shoulder and hit the mud. When the German soldiers panicked and turned their muzzles to the left, he quickly moved to the right. Moving left and right was just to avoid the bullets. The most important thing was his superb speed. A sprinter's movement speed was around 10 seconds for a 100-meter dash, but Cale only needed 3 to 4 seconds for a 100-meter dash. The distance between them, which was originally only 20 to 30 meters, was less than a breath's worth of time. Poochie! Not even giving the second wave of bullets a chance to be fired, Cale closed in on the enemy soldier, raised his hand, and slashed down, the bright blade cutting through the sound of the sound. The leader's eyes were still filled with fear. The broken barrel of the rifle in his hand fell to the ground. Soon, a flat line of blood appeared on his neck, and his head rolled off his body. "Monster!" The soldier behind the leader screamed in fear and was about to run away. Cale took a step forward, reached out his right hand, and grabbed the back of the soldier's neck, lifting him off the ground with one hand. "Let him go," another soldier shouted in panic. Another soldier shouted in a panic. He pointed his gun at Cale, but before he could shoot, a figure suddenly jumped down from above his head and stepped on him. "You're so slow." Cale chuckled. He spun the soldier in his hand 360 degrees and slammed his face into the mud. "Cale, what's going on with your speed and strength?" Steve looked at him in shock as he stepped on the struggling German soldier. Cale's face was calm. He never thought of hiding his super soldier abilities in front of Steve. After all, as long as he wanted to display the corresponding strength, he would have to explain it to the army sooner or later. "I didn't tell you because I've only just mastered this power." Cale sighed and explained to Steve seriously, "Do you still remember my counterattack 10 days ago? In the warehouse of the large enemy base, I found a reagent on the commander. I wanted to bring it back to the base for the scientists to study, but unfortunately, the reagent broke when I was escaping, and the reagent liquid flowed into my wound." Steve didn't doubt Cale at all and asked urgently, "Was the reagent liquid light blue?" Cale nodded and said, "That's right. When the reagent liquid mixed with my blood, I fainted from the pain. When I woke up in the hospital, my body seemed to have undergone an unprecedented mutation. My strength and speed were beyond that of a normal person. Cale, congratulations. It looks like you got the super soldier's original serum and successfully mixed it with your body, Steve said happily. Super soldier's original serum? Kale looked like he didn't understand. Yes. The doctor was originally from the German scientific department and later escaped from the research institute. I heard that the upper echelons of the German army also used the super soldier's original serum. I didn't think that there would be one left. You were lucky to get it. Steve sighed. He was really happy for Kale. After all, Kale was the one who gave him the opportunity to experiment with the super soldier, so he always felt guilty. Kale also knew that the origin of his ability was a bit rough, but based on Steve's 100% trust in him, it was an easy lie. After Steve believed him, he would go back and pass it on to the military. The matter of Kale having a super soldier would basically be settled. I was worried about you, but now you're also a super soldier, plus you have more combat experience than me. The probability of us sneaking into the enemy's factory to rescue the soldiers has greatly increased. Steve said excitedly. If that's the case, then leave the infiltration to me. Kale nodded confidently and said meaningfully to Steve, then, first I'll give you a simple lesson on the battlefield. Before he finished speaking, Kale raised his left foot and stepped forward. The soldier's head that Steve was still stepping on was completely stepped on and was still struggling. The soldier's four limbs danced and struggled even more crazily. Mud splashed everywhere, but under the suppression of absolute power, he quickly suffocated and died in the ground. On the battlefield, don't have any mercy for the enemy. Just kill them in one hit. Killing people isn't necessarily justice, but killing the enemy is the military's justice. Kale said coldly, his cold aura dropping straight to the freezing point. I understand. Steve nodded hesitantly. No matter how strong his body was, he was still a rookie who had never been to the battlefield. He needed to be properly trained. Oh no, it should be taught. Then follow me and head to the factory's main entrance. If you can avoid the patrolling enemy soldiers, then avoid them. If you can't avoid them, don't give them a chance to communicate. Just kill them at close range. After Kale finished speaking, he took the lead and headed in the direction of the factory that he saw on the plain. Steve followed closely behind. Chapter 27. The German factory-like fortress was right outside the gate. Under the curtain of rain, a convoy of 6 large German-style supply trucks slowly drove through the mud. The destination of the transport was obviously the garrison fortress. 2 figures quickly swept through the forest on the side. Taking advantage of the night, they sneaked into the back of the last supply truck. Kale took the lead and entered the back of the truck that was only covered by a leather cloth. When he saw 2 fully armed German soldiers sitting inside, he whispered, "One each." He quickly rushed to one of the soldiers and covered his mouth with his right hand. At the same time, his left hand had already stabbed half of the Nepalese army knife into the soldier's heart. Seeing his comrade killed in front of him, the other soldier finally reacted to the enemy attack. Just as he was about to take out his gun, a young man behind Kale also rushed forward. The steel shield decorated with Captain America's decoration hit the soldier's forehead first. Steve followed with a sharp hand knife and shattered the neck of the unconscious soldier. Not bad, but a bit too slow. Kale, who was sitting next to them, nodded and gave a fair evaluation. You're too fast. Steve dragged the soldier's body and said with a bitter smile. If you want to fight side by side, you have to learn to keep up with my rhythm. Kale shrugged and threw the soldier's body out of the truck. Steve did the same. Killing and throwing away the body was always a simple and crude way to sneak in. Because the German factory here was at the back of the war zone, and there were countless supply trucks going in and out every day, the soldiers at the main gate didn't check the back of the truck one by one. The transport team did not expect that their own vehicle would bring 2 super soldiers from the enemy into the fortress. After the transport truck stopped, Kale and Steve came out of the back of the truck and hid between the bunkers. The sneak in this time was almost effortless. It was much easier than the large base they raided last time. The light rain had completely stopped. Under the dim light of the night, a large factory building was located in the fortress. Soldiers were constantly moving in boxes of supplies. Many soldiers were patrolling with blue light special guns. There were also high-end weapons such as tanks in the fortress. They were all focused on guarding the factory. It doesn't look like a base for soldiers. Instead, it looks more like a manufacturing factory. Kale muttered to himself. He looked around and saw the 20-meter-tall factory building. He could vaguely hear the sound of machinery running. They've been building factories here day and night. What exactly are they trying to make? Steve asked doubtfully. Make what? A thought flashed through Kale's mind. He glanced at Steve beside him and said seriously, "Steve, let's split up." Steve looked at Kale in surprise. Split up? Shouldn't it be safer to move together? What's the point of being safe? The important thing is to quickly find where the hostages are being held. If we are discovered by the enemy, with our strength, we can safely escape, but the hostage might not. Kale explained, the factory is so big. Let's split up and look for them. The first thing we do when we find them is to rescue the hostages. That makes sense. Then you be careful. Steve nodded in agreement. He impatiently avoided the soldiers and went to build the factory. Looking at Steve's back, Kyle had a smug smile on his face. Sorry, brother. You'll attract the attention of the enemy in the factory first. This is also a training for you. After all, there's no better way to learn than to fight in real life. A manufacturing factory. At this time, is there any better energy source for the Germans than gemstone? Kale licked his lips. The outline of his body gradually faded in the darkness. Soon, he completely disappeared. Stealth activated. Nightwalker mode. Up close, Kale was like a shadow that didn't exist in the world. He silently followed Steve. In the factory building of the fortress, the internal machinery and equipment were more advanced than the outside. The German workers were constantly operating the equipment. Steve moved forward stealthily. He was unusually cautious. Without Kale's guidance, he was much more relaxed. Squeak. After crushing the head of a patrolling soldier with the door, Steve completely entered the factory. A cloud of fog maintained a distance of 10 meters behind him. Not bad. It's just that shield that's a bit of an eyesore. Kale couldn't help but complain. It was fine that Steve sneaked in, but he had to carry a steel shield with American stripes and stars painted on the surface of the shield. It was as if he was afraid that people wouldn't know that he was an American soldier. As the vanguard, Captain America is really destined to be a shield soldier. Kale shook his head and continued to follow. Steve walked up to the third floor of the factory. Below the suspended railway were metal pipes and equipment. On the aisle of the third floor were rows of material shelves that glowed with blue light. Energy clips? He picked up a clip with blue light from a box in surprise. He didn't have time to think too much and continued to look for the hostages. As soon as Steve left, the stealthy Kale stopped next to the material shelves. Looking at the rows of blue light clips in front of him, he couldn't help but get excited. How much gemstone energy was there? How many times could he draw cards? Kale was secretly happy. But just as he focused on the materials, the excitement on his face disappeared instantly. New energy clip, a new energy clip made from gemstone energy. It can shoot destructive laser rays. Rare green item card. Do you want to draw? Draw my ass. Kale was speechless. He thought that these energy clips were all blue quality. He didn't expect that they were only rare green quality. Rare green item cards provided for sacrifice as materials were also counted as green cards. This was also the reason why Kale was not interested. The energy clips in front of him could only be used in actual combat. Instead of sacrificing materials, he might as well exchange them for normal green materials on the battlefield. Forget it. I'll just go with Steve to save the hostages. Kale was a bit helpless. But just as he got up and took a step, he seemed to remember something and stopped. Wait a minute. What were the main materials for such a huge new energy production factory? Right. I'm only thinking about these rubbish materials. This place has one of the most precious items on Earth, or even in the universe. Kale's heart skipped a beat as he clenched his fists in excitement. The Tesseract. This place had the Tesseract as a space gem carrier. Thud. Chapter 28. At this time, in the fortress factory. Warning. Warning. The prisoners locked in the underground of the factory have escaped. All soldiers, please go and suppress them immediately. The red warning lights on the walls lit up, and the radio broadcast a sharp and urgent report back and forth. The guards inside and outside the factory reacted quickly. Looks like Steve has already released the prisoners. Kale was still moving stealthily in the corridor of the factory. After hearing the warning broadcast, he immediately knew that Steve had been successfully rescued. It was faster than expected. He couldn't care less. Kale saw a group of German soldiers appear in the corridor in front of him. He immediately exited his stealthy state and ran as fast as he could. He held the military knife in his left hand and clenched his right hand into a fist. His speed soared as he rushed forward. Enemy attack! The German soldier in front of the group shouted in panic. He pulled the trigger of his gun forward, and suddenly, a glaring blue and white laser burst out from the muzzle. The corridor was originally a straight and narrow path, so it was easy to hit the target without aiming. In addition, the speed of the laser was several times faster than the speed of a bullet. Even a super soldier wouldn't be able to dodge it. Kale's pupils contracted. The laser beam kept expanding in his field of vision, and the hairs on his body stood on end. He didn't try to dodge or defend. Instead, he increased his speed and rushed forward. The moment the laser beam was about to hit his chest, he quickly waved his right hand in front of him. Chi! The energy laser beam that could directly evaporate a human body was forcefully reflected by Kale's right arm. The German soldier in front of the group didn't have time to react. The laser beam from his gun had already been reflected back to his body. In the blink of an eye, his entire body, along with his helmet and combat suit, had evaporated into water vapor. He just reflected the laser beam back. Is this a monster? The German soldier had a horrified expression as if he had seen a ghost. The new energy weapon was a high-risk hot weapon that could kill on impact. This was the first time he had seen it ineffective and reflected by someone's hand. Those who block my way, die. Kale didn't care whether the enemy had lost their will to fight or not. To him, whether the enemy would continue to counterattack, flee, or remain motionless like they were now. None of them had any practical effect. Like a cheetah diving into a group of rabbits, Kale rushed into the enemy's ranks and began to harvest lives. The small Nepalese army knife was like the scythe of the goddess of death. Every stab took the life of a soldier. With strength that far exceeded that of a normal person, coupled with the sharp military knife, the enemy's combat suit and human body were as fragile as paper. Scarlet blood splattered and dyed the corridor red. Get out of my way! Kale muttered coldly as he sent the last soldier flying with an elbow strike. Due to the laser beam just now, the bandages and sleeves on his right hand had completely evaporated, revealing the vibranium bracer with a cold metallic texture. Vibranium, also known as sound-absorbing steel. Not only was it one of the hardest materials in the Marvel Universe, but it could also absorb heat, energy, and kinetic energy. Relying on the vibranium arm guard, the laser had lost its offensive power when it landed on Kale's right hand. Furthermore, it had bounced back due to the swing of the arm. After dealing with a group of German soldiers, Kale did not waste any time and sprinted toward the factory's central control room. He did not notice that the scene of him killing the enemy team was clearly transmitted to the other side of the equipment from the camera in the corner of the wall. At this time, in the factory's central control room, the middle-aged Red Skull, who looked like a middle-aged officer, looked at the dozen or so surveillance screens in front of him. His fake face showed a hint of fear. 2 super soldiers invaded the factory. The reason he said this was because on one of the surveillance screens in the underground area of the factory, Steve, who was wearing a blue and white striped bodysuit, was quickly taking down 2 soldiers. On the other screen, it just happened to show Kale rushing into the German army, leaving behind 7 tragic corpses as he continued to approach this side. The first one was fine, but the second one, why is he so strong? Red Skull found it hard to believe. He knew that he could not be like Kale and treat the German army armed with new energy weapons as if they were just for show. The super physique that was used to the extreme, the excellent close combat skills, and the decisive killing. This was simply a war machine. They were all super soldiers, but why was there such a huge difference in strength? Although the super soldier he injected was only the initial unfinished sample and had the terrible drawback of being disfigured into a Red Skull face, the difference in strength should not be so great. Red Skull did not think too much about it. He calmed down and turned on all the self-destruct switches in the factory. The old doctor behind him was shocked and asked, "What are you doing?" Red Skull pointed indifferently to a surveillance screen, in which he could see Kale quickly passing by. "I can't stop him. Not to mention the soldiers here, even I may not be able to stop him. Retreat immediately," Red Skull said and quickly walked to the wall of the central control room. After opening the secret compartment, a square Rubik's Cube object with blue light appeared. The Rubik's Cube. Not to mention this factory, even 10 factories could not compare to 1 in 10,000 of the object in front of him. It should be in front. Kale sped up and turned around the wall. What appeared in his field of vision was a straight corridor with the central control room in the middle of the corridor. At this moment, at the door of the central control room, a German officer was carrying a bag and an old doctor followed him out. The 2 of them were about to leave. "Want to run? Leave the Rubik's Cube behind." Kale snorted and quickly rushed over. "Stop him for me." Red Skull had the idea of fighting. He glared at the doctor fiercely and retreated to the end of the corridor with the bag. "Damn it." The old doctor's face was pale with fright. Knowing that he was abandoned, his legs went soft and he sat in front of the door. "I said, don't try to run." Kale chased after him coldly. He could be sure that the bag in the officer's hand contained the Rubik's Cube. Trash. Red Skull glanced back at the old doctor, but he did not intend to rely on an old man to hold back the decisive super soldier. "Try this." Unknowingly, a new energy cube had appeared in Red Skull's hand and he threw it at Kyle with force. "Gem energy?" Kale looked at the energy cube in surprise. This thing was the raw material for making energy cartridges. It was the blue quality item that he had drawn from the large base last time. This thing's energy state was stable and it could be used as a weapon? Kale's doubts were answered in the next moment. Red Skull took out a pistol, aimed at the energy cube that was still in the air, and pulled the trigger. "This bastard is crazy." Kyle roared angrily and accelerated forward. He grabbed the old doctor on the ground and used him as a meat shield to block in front of him. At the same time, the bullet hit the energy cube. The next moment, even the air froze. Bang! Chapter 29. The dazzling blue energy tide, wherever it spread, whether it was the walls, the ground, or the steel door, they were all annihilated into nothingness. Ah! The screams of the old doctor with glasses were insignificant among them, and his body turned into nothingness little by little until it evaporated. The wall of the corridor shattered and fell, and the dust continued to form a shock wave that shook Kale away. A few seconds later, everything began to calm down. At the end of the corridor, Red Skull tore off the mask on his face, revealing a scarlet skull face. He looked indifferently at the damaged corridor in front of him that had suffered a devastating blow, and coldly dropped a sentence, "See you later, super soldier," and then turned and left without looking back. After a while, in the pile of rubble in the corridor, a sorry figure stood up. It was Kale, who had escaped the disaster. Cough. Kale patted the dust off his body and looked at the torn human skin mask on the ground at the end of the corridor, and his tone was extremely cold. "Red Skull, next time. I promise that next time, let me meet you again, you will die a horrible death. This hatred will be remembered in a small notebook first." Fortunately, there was a meat shield in front of him to block most of the energy wave, and with the block of the vibranium arm guard, Kale's sleeves were burned, and his clothes were damaged. However, I still lost the best opportunity to seize the magic cube. Kale sighed. This time he really suffered a loss, and he underestimated the villain Red Skull. After all, he is the founder of the Hydra organization. Even if his strength is slightly inferior to Steve, his insidious means are still impossible to guard against. At this time, there was a sudden alarm in the hub control room, which only half of the space was intact. Kyle came back to his senses and rushed in as if he had sensed something. He saw the console of the hub control room emitting black smoke, and the main screen prompted in German in red letters "Factory Self-Destruction Countdown, 61 seconds, and the seconds were still decreasing. Directly opposite the control room screen, an unconscious young man was tied to the experiment table with a naked upper body, and there was a large map on the side wall with 6 flags scattered on the map. Kale's attention was keenly focused on the map, and suddenly a card draw message came into his mind. German factories distribution map. It recorded the distribution of 6 German weapons factories and bases. White item card. Do you want to draw? Another map. This is the unlocking stage, right? Kale blinked his eyes, and his lips curled into a cold smile. Red Skull, I'll let you escape as you wish. I'll destroy your nest one by one first. Kale had just drawn the distribution map from the wall into a card when a tall figure suddenly rushed into the room. The two of them looked at each other and were slightly stunned. Kale? Steve? After going around in a big circle, Kale and Steve met up in the factory's control room. What happened here? Steve was bewildered as he looked around the damaged control room. It's very simple. The factory's commander was anxious and threw an energy bomb to stop me. Kale shrugged and gestured with his chin to the young man lying in the room. That's the person you want to save this time. It's Baki. Steve was overjoyed when he saw the young man and hurried over to wake him up. Just carry him with your shoulder. This place is about to explode. Kale said and pointed to the main screen. There was only half a minute left on the countdown. Steve nodded and did as he was told. He carried his comatose friend on his shoulder. Kyle was about to lead the way and escape when he suddenly saw something on the console table. Car key, the key to Red Skull's exclusive car. The car was built with top German craftsmanship and has amazing horsepower. White item card. Got it, follow me. Kale grabbed the car key and rushed to the factory's garage with Steve. The half-minute countdown ended. Explosions occurred all over the factory at the same time, and the new energy materials triggered a series of explosions. The fire lit up the wilderness at night. Outside the factory, a large number of UA military prisoners were liberated. After looting the factory's new energy weapons and tanks, the German troops stationed here were defeated. Seeing the factory self-destruct, all the UA soldiers rushed out. Just then, with the roar of an engine, a fashionable and exquisite luxury car that looked like a work of art suddenly rushed out of the explosion. Listen to my orders, break out in the direction of our base. Care, who was in the driver's seat, shouted. He stepped on the accelerator and led the charge, smashing through the factory's iron fence. It was as if he was driving Red Skull's precious car as a tank. Follow. Follow. When the U.S. soldiers saw Steve and Bucky in the car, who were dressed conspicuously, they knew that they were on the same side. They immediately cheered and followed the car into the wilderness in the dark night. One night passed. In the morning, when the sky was just bright, Carter couldn't hold back and went to the communication center of the training base to inquire about the news. Lieutenant Cale and Steve Rogers disappeared in the third area after the war last night. The factory has lost all signs of life. The search team has returned and is now ready to officially register them as dead. Commander Brandt personally received the telegram and said coldly to Carter, "Because of you, we not only lost an excellent officer, a propaganda leader, but also the lives of hundreds of soldiers. If this is the result, I am willing to take all the responsibility." Carter responded calmly. She didn't believe that the two men died so easily on the battlefield. "It doesn't matter what you say now." Brandt suddenly paused halfway through his sentence and turned his gaze to the side behind him. It was the sound of a car driving, faintly coming from the wilderness of the base. "Look, what's that? Oh my God!" The soldiers in the base who were preparing for training were all surprised as they surrounded the back door of the base and quickly moved to the sides to make space. A heavily damaged luxury car was leading the way. Cale sat in the driver's seat and drove slowly, while Steve and Bucky sat shoulder to shoulder in the back seat. Behind the luxurious car were hundreds of U.S. soldiers armed with new energy weapons. Although they had fought all night and their faces were full of fatigue, every step they took was firm and resolute. They were back. "This kid is really," when Commander Brandt saw the enemy tanks behind the team, he was completely speechless. "Did they rob the enemy's factory? Please give me a chance to show my talent as a soldier." The young man's firm words still echoed in his ears. He didn't know when, but the recruit who just entered the base had quickly become a hero who repeatedly created miracles. "That's really amazing." Officer Brandt continued his unfinished words and took the lead in applauding. The soldiers in the training base also followed suit and applauded. Chapter 30. The battle between Cale and Steve to rescue the captives ended in a complete victory. On the same day, Cale handed over the battle report and map to Commander Brandt. He didn't even personally confirm the military merits. After washing up and changing into a formal shirt with Steve, he immediately went to meet up with Howard, Carter, and others. After all, before rescuing the hostages, Howard said that he would treat them to sesame hot pot. This couldn't be casually brushed off by him. Howard was a rich local tyrant. They couldn't be polite with him. Therefore, under Cale's strong suggestion, they took Stark's plane to the nearest city to attend a banquet and dinner. Howard was not only rich, but also very gentlemanly. The place he invited them to was naturally not an ordinary restaurant. The entrance of the hotel was luxuriously dazzling with golden lights. A clean red carpet covered the ground. The security guards were gentlemen in suits. The customer service receptionists were all beautiful women in short skirts. "Howard, you really know how to live a good life," Cale commented. Howard maintained a noncommittal smile and took the three into the hotel. Howard was obviously a regular here. The customer service receptionists didn't even confirm his identity. When they saw him coming, they flirted with him and offered all kinds of VIP services. The dining hall on the first floor was much more low-key and luxurious than the outside. Under the warm classical lights, musicians played violins and guests ate elegantly under the music. Most of the people here were either rich or respectable. They didn't have the slightest worry about the war in the outside world. However, when Howard was about to ask the front desk customer service to find a 4-person table, Cale spoke first and asked the customer service staff to find 2 two-person tables. When Howard heard this, he immediately smiled. 2-person table? Lieutenant Kale, you know what I mean. Let me and the beauty Carter have dinner together tonight. You think too much. Kale rolled his eyes and looked at Carter next to Steve. Tonight, she was finally no longer dressed in a female military dress. Carter wore a strapless long dress to match the occasion. With a little makeup on her already beautiful face, she looked even more beautiful. Her red dress was just right, outlining her mature figure that had been concealed in the past. I promised you to bring Steve back safely. I didn't break my promise. Kale said to Carter. Without waiting for her response, he patted Steve's shoulder. You take Carter to dinner first. Ah. Steve first exclaimed in surprise, and then hurriedly nodded. Oh, I understand. I'm creating an opportunity for you. Kyle chuckled to himself. He didn't have any thoughts about Carter, so there was no such thing as pity. More importantly, the purpose of tonight was not as simple as eating a sumptuous dinner. The two of you, please follow me. The customer service receptionist bowed warmly and gestured to the dining area with her hand. She led Steve and Carter to their seats first. Ah. Carter left just like that? Howard's face was full of disappointment. He glanced at Kale and said hesitantly, Are we two men going to dinner? Or a double meal? It's up to you whether you want to eat or not. To be honest, I have something else to discuss with you tonight. Kale shrugged. Something else? Howard looked at Kale in confusion. Kyle said meaningfully, As for the specifics, let's find a place to sit down first. On the basement floor of the hotel building. The style here was different from the main hall on the first floor. Under the dim light, all kinds of gentlemen and women were letting go of themselves and dancing to the music. The receptionist holding the wine glasses was wearing even more revealing clothes. She wore a bunny-made outfit with thin fabric. Her white tube top and long legs were very attractive. Howard brought Kale to sit at the bar. On the way, he openly pinched the buttocks of a few bunny girls passing by. He was romantic and gentlemanly. Sure enough, the Stark family was full of playboys. Kale secretly complained and ordered a glass of vodka from the bartender. Howard ordered a cocktail. Then, let's have a toast to World War II. Howard elegantly raised his glass and said something unexpected. Kale looked at him in surprise and asked, Is there something to be happy about when there's a war? Of course. For someone like me who studies scientific strategies, destructive weapons, and super technology, it's hard for me to even do my job without a war. Howard maintained his smile and looked at Kale. Aren't you the same? If there wasn't a war, you wouldn't have been able to rise from a recruit to a lieutenant in just a few weeks. I have to say, your view of benefits is quite strong. Kale couldn't help but laugh. He raised his glass and clinked it with Howard's. War had its advantages and disadvantages. For those who had the ability, it was an unprecedented opportunity. For those who didn't, it was an abhorrent disaster. Howard drank a mouthful of wine and said, Don't keep me in suspense. If there's something you want to discuss with me, just say it. Otherwise, I'll have to hit on a beauty. Kale nodded and went straight to the point. Okay, I'll be frank. I want shares of Stark Industries. You want to become a partner in my industry? Howard was a bit surprised. His fingers tapped on the table. Can you tell me the reason? Kale drank and said, It's very simple. I believe in Stark Industries' potential. In the future, it will definitely be the top strategic and scientific manufacturer on this planet. The most important thing is that I believe in you. You're a 100% top genius. I have to say, you have a good eye. Howard was satisfied with the answer. He was a top genius and had enough capital to be proud. Because it's a time of war, my current work is still focused on the country's scientific and technological strategic research. Although the Stark Industries I founded hasn't made much progress yet, it has already achieved results in the anti-gravity project. In the future, it will involve more scientific fields. If the war ends, Stark Industries will develop rapidly. Howard looked at Cale seriously and said, "It's not that I'm looking down on you. I've seen your file. You don't have a lot of assets under your name. Even a colonel's salary can't be that high. May I ask how you want to invest in Stark Industries?" Even if they were friends, Stark Industries shares couldn't be given away for free. Cale naturally understood this point. He dared to talk about shares with a proud genius like Howard. Of course, he had enough trump cards. "I'm not investing in money, but in the future." As he spoke, he took out a rectangular, thin machine from his pocket and placed it on the bar. The front of the machine was a tempered glass screen with a small camera on it. The back of the machine was a smooth metal shell with a prominent Apple logo in the middle. Chapter 31. What kind of machine is this? It looks like the manufacturing process is excellent. After all, he was the most outstanding manufacturing expert among scientists. Howard looked at the exquisite metal casing of the iPhone and felt that this item was not simple. He picked up the phone and weighed it, then began to fiddle with it from left to right. "I call it a mobile phone." Cale smiled faintly and began to explain like a salesman, "Don't be fooled by its small size. It is actually an instrument with hundreds of functions. It has fingerprint unlock, face unlock, simple voice control, photo and video recording, storage decompression, message transmission, time alarm, calculation recording, game music, call service, search engine, and so on. This small machine has such advanced practical functions?" Howard was shocked and quickly checked it carefully. Cale laughed secretly. He almost couldn't help but laugh out loud when he saw the smartest and top manufacturing genius on earth praising a mobile phone. This mobile phone was only a green quality item card. It was one of the common goods that he had drawn from the previous sacrificial draw card. Cale originally thought that it was World War II, and even telephone signal towers and the internet had not been widely established, so it was useless to draw a mobile phone. It wasn't until the last time he met Howard on the plane that an idea suddenly came to Cale's mind. The mobile phone was indeed useless to him now, but it was completely different for the genius scientific manufacturer Howard. No matter what. This mobile phone had indeed reached the point of being rotten on the streets in the 21st century, but in the current 1943, it was an advanced technological product that spanned more than half a century. Howard operated the mobile phone and looked at the lit screen. His eyes became brighter and his fingers quickly performed various commands. This surprised Cale, who was next to him. He didn't even explain the basic operation of the mobile phone to Howard, but Howard quickly began to master the operation of the mobile phone for the first time with his keen sense of technological products. He was worthy of being the father of the man who could create artificial intelligence and Iron Man suits in the future. He had the passive card of technology adaptation. Cale allowed Howard to try the mobile phone. Most of the software on the mobile phone had been deleted long ago, and the time record had been changed. However, even if Howard discovered any secrets from it, he didn't care. This trial lasted for a full 10 minutes. After Cale finished the fourth glass of wine, Howard turned off his phone. He rubbed his chin thoughtfully, and then looked at Cale seriously. A color screen with high resolution, precise touch control, and various soft and practical functions that can't be achieved now. This machine called a mobile phone came from a planet whose technological level far exceeded ours. Or perhaps the future world. Forgive me for not being able to tell you too much about its origins. But I can guarantee a few things. In the face of Howard's doubts, Kyle smiled and held up 3 fingers as he said, "First, its origin is absolutely safe. Secondly, there was no second mobile phone in this world. Third, it will only bring you advantages and no disadvantages. As long as we thoroughly understand the advanced technology of this machine, Stark Industries will have enough capital to enter the top technology manufacturing industry before the end of World War II. I understand. Howard fell into deep thought again. Cale wasn't in a hurry. He looked at the gentlemen and ladies dancing to their heart's content and continued to taste the wine with the unique flavor of the old era. "Sir, may I have the honor of dancing with you?" During this time, many young ladies took the initiative to strike up a conversation with Cale. After all, he looked young and handsome, and his perfect and robust body paired with a formal shirt was very charming. "Sorry, I have something to do with my friend." Cale's gentle and gentlemanly rejection made many young ladies disappointed, but some still mustered up the courage to leave their contact cards. After a long time, Howard asked tentatively, "How many shares of Stark Industries do you want to invest in this mobile phone?" With such a sentence, it meant that they could continue the discussion. Cale also secretly let out a sigh of relief. Obviously, he wasn't as calm as he looked on the surface. Although he still had a lot of confidence in the mobile phone, this was the Marvel world after all. Now, there were new energy weapons, anti-gravity devices, laser tanks, and self-driving fighter jets. There were countless black technologies, and Howard wasn't sure if it could move him. "I want 40%, Cale said. 40%? Howard was just about to drink the first glass of wine when he suddenly choked. He coughed and said, You're asking for a sky-high price. Since it's a cooperation, of course I'll invest in more than one mobile phone." Cale's face was calm as he threw out the second hidden card in his hand. "The mobile phone I brought today is just a bargaining chip for the first cooperation. I have something that's not worse than this. Can you roughly explain the function of that item?" Howard was interested again. Cale had given him enough surprises tonight. "I can only say that it's an introduction to the field of artificial intelligence." As soon as Cale finished speaking, Howard's whole body shook. He couldn't hold the glass steadily and put it on the bar, spilling the wine all over the table. Now, even computers were still being developed and the system was only in its embryonic form. What did artificial intelligence represent? It represented the future. If what you said is true, then you're really investing in the future. Howard was so excited that his whole body trembled. Cale smiled and asked, "I don't know if 40% of Stark Industries shares is a high price under this premise." "It's not high. It's definitely not high. Even if you want 50%, I'll give it to you." Howard's previous hesitation no longer existed. He had no reason to refuse. Money, fame, power, and beautiful women, Howard liked all of them. But if they were put together with inventions, they weren't worth mentioning at all. "I only want 40%. It's better for you to be the founder and the first shareholder," Cale said with a smile. Stark Industries could only develop into a top industry if it was completely under Howard's control. His investment was a small capital and a huge profit. It was like raising a chicken that could continuously lay golden eggs. He didn't need to worry about money in the future. Then it's settled. You invest in the mobile phone and another item in exchange for 40% of Stark Industries shares. Howard laughed and happily raised his glass to the bartender at the front desk. He raised the glass high and said, "Happy cooperation." "Happy cooperation." Cale raised his own glass in response. The two clinked their glasses together again. Then, they both raised their heads and drank. Chapter 32. Cale estimated that Carter and the others were about to finish their dinner, so he left the ballroom bar on the basement with Howard. "Cale, after such a big deal tonight, you should treat us." Howard teased Cale. After this short discussion, the two could be considered to have established a partnership and were much closer to each other. "Sure." Cale smiled and blinked, "But you also know that I'm still very poor right now, and I haven't paid the officer's salary yet. I don't know if the big boss can give me next month's bonus from Stark Industries in advance." "You're really..." Howard shook his head speechlessly. He felt like he had dug a hole for himself and ended up burying himself in it. However, he still took out an exquisite gold card and a check with a receipt from his wallet and handed it over. This card is the permanent VIP card of the charming hotel here. There's also a deposit of $20,000 inside, you can use it first. Also, here's a check for $100,000. You can withdraw cash from the central banks in major cities, but it's best to make an appointment first. Otherwise, they won't be able to take out so much money. The average salary of an ordinary UAE soldier was only $60 a month. The $120,000 he casually threw out was a veritable huge sum. Kale didn't hesitate to take it and teased, "I didn't expect a month's bonus to be so high." "Thank you, boss." Howard urged, "No need to thank me. Just send the second investment item to me as soon as possible. I'll ask the lawyer to prepare the transfer agreement for you. After you sign it, you'll be a partner of Stark Industries." "No problem." Kale nodded. The second item could also be carried on his body as a card, but it was inconvenient to take it out in front of others. What's the second item to invest in? In fact, it was the system program chip of the supercomputer. It was the green item card that Kale had drawn that was even more useless than a phone. It was a scattered part of a unit. However, if one wanted to step into the field of artificial intelligence, it was definitely the best stepping stone. Kale and Howard had just returned to the lobby on the first floor of the hotel when they saw Carter walking towards them in a hurry. "Finished dinner? Where's Steve?" Kale asked in surprise. Unexpectedly, Carter glared at him and asked, "Where did you two go?" "I asked Steve to look for you, but he couldn't find you." "This." Before Kale could answer, Howard laughed and said, "Don't ask. Men naturally have their own places for entertainment. Your answer can easily make people think the wrong way." Kale cursed inwardly, but Carter didn't think too much of it. She said seriously, "General Chester just sent me an order to pass it on to you guys. Let's head back to the training base first. We haven't even had a chance to relax, and now we have to go back to work." Howard helplessly slapped his head. "It's about the intelligence map, right?" Kale showed a thoughtful expression. He had already thought that after reporting the intelligence map, there would definitely be orders from above, but he didn't think that it would be decided so quickly. "Kale." Steve's voice came from behind. He just happened to return at this time. "Everyone's here. Let's pay the bill and leave." Kale smiled and casually handed the VIP card in his pocket to the hotel staff. "This will pay for the four of us tonight." With money on him, he felt a lot more confident. "Kale, I didn't think you were so rich." Steve was surprised. He didn't need to look to know that the cost of this hotel wasn't something that ordinary people could afford. Carter was even more surprised. She had also seen Kale's personal information. Then where did this hotel VIP card come from? What did these two people do just now? Carter looked at Kale and Howard suspiciously. She couldn't think of a reason. That day, they flew out to eat in a big city and returned to the training base on the same day. On the plane, Carter seriously explained General Chester's orders to the three of them. "Kale and Steve, you two will be the leaders. Choose soldiers from the training base to form an armed team. One by one, you will attack the 6 German factories in the war zone. As long as the factories that provide weapons and supplies fall, Germany will no longer be a threat to Europe. Steve, from now on, you will be a corporal." Carter's gaze fell on Kale. "As for you, you will continue to accumulate military merits. This time, you won't be promoted." "It doesn't matter." Kale nodded. He hadn't even warmed up his lieutenant's certificate yet. He was used to accumulating military merits and then being promoted. He liked the rhythm of jumping ranks. Carter continued seriously, "Stark, you will provide scientific strategic equipment for 2 super soldiers." "Oh." Howard was piloting the plane and responded casually. Soon, he seemed to realize something and turned his head in shock. 2 super soldiers? That's right. Kale also became a super soldier, Steve replied. This information was specially reported when he returned after the war. Carter stared straight at Kale and said seriously, "Next, you will be in charge of monitoring and recording under my supervision and collecting information about the super soldiers." "Okay." Kale replied weakly and muttered in a low voice, "I am at least a lieutenant. How can I lose face if I am supervised by a woman like you? Why don't you just have Steve as your guinea pig?" Carter pretended not to hear and maintained her cool and elegant demeanor. Steve immediately suggested, "If you need people to form an armed team, just gather the soldiers who were rescued last night. They have been fighting on the front lines for a long time and have experience in using new energy weapons against the Germans." "No problem. As captives, they must have a lot of pent-up energy that they haven't completely vented last night. But on top of that, I will also need to transfer someone from the 102nd Regiment," Kale said after some thought. "Who?" Carter asked. She still had the authority to transfer just one person from the front lines. "His name is Nick Fry. He is a very intelligent and capable staff sergeant," Kale said with a smile. This was a chance to quickly accumulate military merits. He was also taking good care of Fry. Achoo! In a temporary tent on the front lines, a one-eyed black officer sneezed. He touched his bald head in surprise, a little confused. "The weather isn't cold. Why do I have a bad feeling?" Chapter 33. A day passed. Steve gathered the soldiers he rescued and quickly formed a sizable army. This was also thanks to his personal charm, his sense of justice, and his natural ability to be a leader. At noon, a helicopter landed in the training base. Fry walked down from the helicopter with a military bag on his back. He looked around in confusion, not knowing why he was transferred here from the front line alone. The frontline commander only informed him that there was an important dispatch order, then he hurriedly packed his bag and boarded the helicopter. "Fry, long time no see." A familiar voice suddenly came from behind. Fry turned around, and when he saw who it was, his jaw dropped. "Kale?" "Call me sir." Kale purposely put on a straight face and pointed at the military rank on his chest. "Yes, Lieutenant Kale. You didn't transfer me here this time, did you?" Fry said unhappily. He already knew that Kale was promoted to lieutenant when he was at the front line, so he wasn't too surprised. "What do you think? Other than me, who would purposely use the military's authority to transfer you?" Kale shrugged. "Tell me, why did you transfer me here? Don't tell me it's to cooperate with you on the battlefield?" Fray's voice was trembling. Although he was promoted to sergeant after cooperating with Kale last time, it was still too crazy when he thought back to the battle. Kale was not the kind of person who would follow the conventional path step by step. If he could fight head-on, he would not back down. If he couldn't fight head-on, he would continue to fight head-on. It was not an exaggeration to say that he was a war maniac. "It's not to go to the front line." Kale comforted him. Fry was about to breathe a sigh of relief, but Kale's next sentence almost made him faint. "It's to enter the enemy's rear and attack the German factory bases. A total of 6 of them. You're dragging me down." Fry was so depressed that he wanted to vomit blood. "I'm purposely taking care of you, so that you can display your leadership skills in advance." Kale revealed a devilish smile. As the future director of SHELD, there was no reason for such a talent to be wasted in a stalemate at the front line. In the basement of the base, the walls of the passageway were lit with dim yellow lights, which were divided into many research departments and basements. Many correspondents, researchers, and officers were here to analyze the situation in the front line. Kale led Fry all the way inside. As soon as he stepped into the entrance of the Science and Strategy Department, someone in the room seemed to have noticed them. A blue figure quickly walked over to greet them. "Kale, you came just in time. What do you think of my new combat uniform?" It was Steve. He stopped in front of the door and asked for Kale's opinion. "Well." Kale's gaze fell on Steve's body. He had changed into a tight-fitting leather suit that was much better in quality and fashion than before. However, it was still the same blue base, with the eye-catching 5-star silver emblem on his chest and a dark blue hood that covered half of his face. How should he put it? His outfit was eye-catching, but the question was he really going to war? Kale secretly complained. The enemy didn't even need to think to know that such a flashy outfit was the leader. If they didn't focus their fire on him, who would they focus their fire on? However, Kale's comment was completely different. "Very good. This is also in line with your title as Captain America. Leading the team at the forefront like a captain, you can bring great courage and faith to the soldiers." "Really? That's great." Steve nodded with satisfaction. It was only then that he noticed Fry behind Kale. "This is..." Kale introduced, "Let me introduce you to Nick Fry. I asked Carter to transfer him from the front line. Hello, my name is Steve Rogers. I'm one of the leaders of the team this time." Steve stretched out his hand and shook Fray's hand. The future director of SHELD, and the symbol of the predecessor of SHELD, under the matchmaking of Kale, completed their historic meeting in the basement ahead of time. "Kale, I knew that you would be satisfied with the Captain America combat suit I made. The material of the suit is not ordinary leather, but a high-fiber material. It's not easy to damage, resistant to dust and heat, and has a certain bulletproof ability." Howard came out of the lab and explained to Kale. Then, as if to surprise him, he said, "I'm going to make one for you too. The materials just arrived by air." "Ah, that's not necessary." Kale forced a smile. "Wearing the same combat suit as Captain America on the battlefield? That would be too embarrassing." Howard said seriously, "That's a must. I promise to prepare scientific and strategic weapons for you two super soldiers. This is my job in the military." Kale refused again and again to no avail. In the end, he reluctantly agreed, "You can make the combat suit, but the general style will have to be modified according to my requirements." "That's not a problem." Howard nodded in agreement and waved at them, "Come, let me show you something." Howard led them into the lab, picked up an item from a box, and placed it in front of everyone. Kale was the first to open his eyes wide. It was a round metal shield with a smooth surface. At the same time, the card information on the shield appeared in front of his eyes. Ardman's shield, made of the original Ardman metal, the specific composition is vibranium, iron, and some kind of chemical. Almost indestructible, able to resist extreme pressure, extreme temperature, radiation, electromagnetic spectrum, and other attacks. Prevents the transmission of kinetic energy. Has perfect aerodynamic characteristics. The angle of force can be controlled to make it return to the origin after being thrown. A rare blue item card. This shield is made of materials that were accidentally synthesized. Due to the process of synthesizing the materials and the proportion of the various components are unknown, it is no longer possible to recreate this metal. It can be said to be a unique piece of equipment in the world. After Howard finished the introduction, he looked at Kale and Steve. There was only one shield, but who should he give it to? Both of them were super soldiers. If it was before, he would give it to Steve, who had become a super soldier first. But now, whether it was for public or private reasons, Kale was clearly the best candidate to use this shield. Kale, before Howard could finish, Kale took the shield. He tapped the hard surface of the shield with his finger and said with emotion, "This is really a very good piece of equipment. Steve, you can use it." Kale casually stuffed the shield into Steve's arms, which surprised everyone present. Kale, this. Steve hugged the shield with both hands and was at a loss as to what to do. He wanted to open his mouth and refuse. Okay. Kale patted Steve's shoulder heavily and interrupted him, you and I don't have to separate. Take this shield, and don't drag me down on the battlefield in the future. Yes, I know. Steve was not pretentious. He was touched and held the shield in his hands tightly. His eyes were full of determination and determination. Very good, just like that. Kale smiled slightly. He had vibranium arm guards as defensive equipment. Although the shield was good, it was not suitable for his battle philosophy of attack is defense. Moreover, without a shield, how could Steve fight evenly with the enemy? Chapter 34. Well, since Kale said so, then this shield will be used by Steve. Howard thought for a moment and said, actually, there is another piece of equipment. Although it is not as comprehensive as this shield, its lethality is many times higher. Don't keep me in suspense. What other equipment do you have? Kale urged. Wait a moment. Howard said as he opened another airmail box and took out an item that looked like a long sword. The hilt was just enough to be grasped by hand, and the rest was covered by the leather scabbard. This is Dash. Kale's eyes locked on the item, and a blue card information quickly appeared. Sodium carbon steel sword, a high craftsmanship long sword made of carbona alloy. Blue item card. Carbona is a type of radioactive metal. Although its hardness is lower than adamantium, it has very good ductility, so the blade is very thin. The long sword is tough and sharp, and can inhibit the healing factor of the human body, causing permanent damage. There was no rare prefix, but the blue grade proved that the equipment was not ordinary. A long sword made of sodium carbon steel. Kale reached out and took the long sword. Holding the cold hilt, he pulled the sword out of the leather scabbard. Suddenly, a cold light shone in the basement. This was a one-handed sword. The guard was elongated to form a cross with the blade. The blade was forged to the extreme, and no one dared to question whether it could cut through iron like mud. Howard explained, this sword is made of carbona alloy. I got it from the Russians, and it is only enough to make this small one-handed sword. I designed it according to the style of the Middle Ages. I hope you like it. I like it very much. Kale nodded, and his face was filled with unconcealable satisfaction. With the vibranium bracers as defensive equipment, what he needed most now was an offensive weapon. In the fierce battle with the German army, the Nepalese army knife was gradually unable to keep up with the intensity of the battle. And this sodium carbon steel sword was just enough to replace the army knife that was worn out in many places. That's fine. One of you will hold a shield, and the other will hold a sword. As the leader of the team and the top combat power, we will have more confidence in destroying the German factory base. Howard thought of something and said to Kale, tell me your request for the combat suit later, and I'll be able to make it tonight. This way, both of you will be fully equipped. Kale nodded. In fact, it was just a modification based on Captain America's combat suit. If the basic color, pattern, and hood configuration of the suit were removed, he could reluctantly accept it. Steve said, we've also gathered most of our teams, and we've controlled them to around 500 people. We'll use the German new energy weapons as the main weapon, supplemented by conventional weapons. We'll be able to arm ourselves into an elite offensive force. It seems that as long as we wait for the intelligence personnel in the base to finish their analysis and implement the orders from above, we can start the operation tomorrow. The corners of Kale's mouth curled up slightly, and his eyes were cold. Red Skull, let's see how long you're going to hide. Fry saw Kale's cold face and subconsciously shrank back half a step. For the first time, he felt pity for the German army. After all, they were targeted by a killing god. Another day passed. This morning, the colonel in the training base finally received the official attack order after an hour-long discussion with the general. The highest person in charge was Lieutenant Kale and Captain Steve. The two would lead a 500-person force into the enemy's theater of operations, cross 30 miles, and attack the first factory base as the target. The attack order was, White Star Plan. In the afternoon, in the basement of the base, Carter quickly walked through the passage, looked around, and finally ran directly in the direction of the research room. As soon as she opened the door of the research room, there was a powerful explosion with a faint blue light inside. 2 people in scientific research suits were hit by the shockwave and fell to the ground. "Stark, are you okay?" Carter called out and looked at Howard and his assistant sitting on the ground in surprise. "It's nothing, I just studied the German army's new energy source." Howard got up from the ground and asked in confusion, "What are you doing here? Aren't Kale and Steve about to leave?" "I was just about to ask you." Carter looked at the empty research room and frowned. "I thought the 2 of them were preparing here." Howard shook his head and said, "No. I haven't seen the 2 of them since Kale came over and took away the combat suit last night. Maybe they're organizing the team in the square. These 2 people are really worrisome." Carter stomped her feet and quickly rushed to the square of the base. When Carter arrived at the main square of the training base, he found that the place was already crowded with soldiers. They were all so excited that they stood on their tiptoes and wanted to squeeze in to get a better view. Just then, a cold voice came from the innermost part of the crowd of soldiers. "Listen to my order, all of you sit down." Swoosh! Thousands of American soldiers immediately sat down quietly, and the lively scene in the square instantly quieted down. Only Carter, who had just arrived, was still standing at the outermost part of the crowd. He looked in the direction of her gaze. 500 armed forces, who were ready to leave, surrounded the central area, while the rest of the soldiers from the training base surrounded the outer circle. In the circular area with a radius of 5 meters, 2 tall and strong young men stood facing each other. One of them was wearing a blue and white combat suit with a silver star symbol of American justice on the chest. He wore a dark blue mask that covered his face and carried a colorful metal round shield on his back. The other one was wearing the same black and gold combat uniform. The emblem on his chest was a rotating cross that symbolized death. As he wasn't wearing a hood, his handsome face was exposed. On his back was a one-handed sword with a leather sheath. "Steve, Kale, what are you doing?" Carter looked at the 2 people surrounded by many soldiers in the square, still confused. In the central area, Kale stared at Steve and said coldly, "Steve, are we really going to fight? It's almost time for the planned departure." "Yes. Just treat it as a warm-up exercise," Steve said firmly, clenching his hands into fists and getting ready for close combat. "I won't go easy on you." Kale narrowed his eyes. Although he didn't know why Steve suddenly proposed to fight before departure, he had no reason to back down. Steve said stubbornly, "Please use all your strength." "Very well." Kale smiled faintly and didn't use the weapon on his back. Instead, he clenched his fists and got into a similar close combat posture. "I heard that you were evenly matched with everyone." Chapter 35. Thousands of American soldiers were sitting in the center of the square, watching the fight. Kale and Steve were still facing each other in silence a moment ago. The next moment, both of them rushed toward each other. From the perspective of a third party, they were already engaged in close combat in the blink of an eye. "Be careful." Steve seemed to realize that he couldn't let Kale get the upper hand, so he took the initiative to put pressure on Chen Xiaobei. As soon as he got close to the attack range, his left hand, which had been gathering power, hit Kale's face like a whip. "Bro, don't hit people in the face." Kale held back his sarcasm and reacted quickly. He raised his right arm, which wasn't wearing the vibranium bracer, and blocked the attack. Bang! Seeing that his attack didn't work, Steve bent his left leg back and raised his knee. He didn't want to give Chen Xiaobei any chance to recover. He wanted to use high-intensity attacks to crush his opponent. Kale raised his left leg as if he had seen this coming. He kicked the side of Steve's leg and stopped the knee that was about to hit his stomach. Huh! Steve frowned. He didn't expect to be at a disadvantage so quickly because of the difference in experience. He gritted his teeth and advanced instead of retreating. He continued to attack with his fists and legs, fighting Kyle in close combat. Bang, bang, bang. Both of them were just fighting with their fists and feet, but there were powerful explosions in the air. Should I say that they are indeed super soldiers? They are so strong. They can kill ordinary people with one punch. Cough, cough. Can you guys at the back step back a little? I am a little scared now. The soldiers in the crowd were stunned. The soldiers sitting in the innermost circle swallowed their saliva and subconsciously moved back, afraid that the fight between the two would affect them. Kyle blocked the fist once again. Although he was able to do so with ease, he was gradually losing his breath under the pressure of the crazy attacks. This made Steve secretly happy. He felt that he had made the right bet by persisting in attacking. However, as they brushed past each other, he suddenly saw a smile appear on Kale's cold face. He was actually smiling. Steve's forehead was covered in cold sweat, but at this moment, the two of them were entangled in close combat, and it was already impossible to stop the attacks at hand. He could only brace himself and continue to fight to the end. Have you finally realized it? Kale maintained the smile on his face. Steve understood him very well and knew that his offensive methods were much stronger than his defensive methods. Therefore, from the very beginning, he desperately strengthened his offense, not wanting to let him take the initiative to attack. It's a pity that you don't understand. You're giving up your natural defensive advantage just like that. Kale lightly shook his head. His hands and feet suddenly changed into a defensive posture, forcefully turning himself into the offensive side, counterattack. Endurance fight. Military boxing. Grappling technique. More than a dozen types of offensive fighting moves were smoothly switched to the end. Steve's face changed drastically. Kale's fighting skills changed too quickly. He wanted to change from offense to defense at the last minute, but he was hit by a series of punches and kicks. He could not maintain the power to counterattack or defend at all. Let me teach you what offense is. Kale smiled coldly and firmly suppressed Steve. With a slight gust of wind, his fists landed on Steve's flesh, not giving him any room to resist. Steve smiled bitterly. He fell into a passive position and could only protect his face with his hands. He was unilaterally beaten like a sandbag. What the hell is going on? Lieutenant Kale was suppressed at first, but in the blink of an eye, Captain Steve is hanging up and beating him up? I don't understand either. The group of UA soldiers who were watching were in an uproar. They looked at the dramatic scene in the central area with complicated feelings. You little bastards, who asked you not to work hard to learn fighting skills? A voice sounded from outside the crowd of soldiers. Some soldiers looked back and saw that Officer Joseph, who was wearing a military officer's uniform, had become a member of the audience at some point. Joseph looked at the two people fighting and said, Steve's fighting skills are far worse than Kale's. If Steve has as many as 5 types of fighting skills, then Kale has more than 15 types of fighting skills. At this point, Joseph laughed and sighed in admiration. This kid is really a monster among monsters. Fall for me. In the central area, Kale threw a straight punch with all his strength. It landed cleanly under Steve's abdomen and sent him flying. Steve groaned in pain. The shield on his back slid across the ground and only stopped when he reached the crowd of onlooking soldiers. Admit defeat, Steve. There is still a clear gap between you and me. If you were an enemy, you would be dead in less than 50 rounds. Kale panted coldly and looked straight at Steve, who was lying on the ground. If it was just based on physique, the two of them were actually the same. But even if they couldn't use two ruthless killing methods, Kale's strength still crushed Steve's. Just as Joseph said, the gap between their fighting skills was too big. The fighting skills that Steve knew, Kale also knew, but the fighting skills that Kale knew, Steve might not know. Of course, this couldn't be blamed on Steve. Even if he had the ability to learn quickly, he still needed a lot of energy to learn and master it, plus actual combat training. But Kale was different. It didn't matter if he learned or not, he could just read the card and be done with it. It was a bit like in online games, when a player with limited privileges met a player with cheats. Not yet. Steve struggled to get up from the ground. He spat out a mouthful of blood and said resolutely, "I haven't admitted defeat yet. I can still fight like this for another day. Up to you." Kale shrugged and was about to continue attacking, but Steve's next move made him reveal a surprised expression. It was Steve who had put the Aegis of Adaman on his left hand. "That's right, otherwise it would be too boring," Kale said with a smile. He suddenly increased his speed and rushed forward. Steve didn't attack rashly this time. Looking at Kale, who was rushing over, he calmly raised his shield and suddenly waved his left hand forward. The shield flew out of his hand. He was using the shield as a long-range throwing weapon. Kale's pupils shrank. Looking at the incoming shield, he quickly raised his right fist and collided with it. The shield managed to block it, but with a swishing sound, the shield returned to its original direction like a boomerang. This shield. Not good. Kale realized something and wanted to retreat. But it was too late. Steve had already leaped in front of him, caught the shield with his left hand, and slammed it down from above. Kale could only use his elbow to hit the shield. As soon as his elbow landed on the shield, the force of his elbow was absorbed. At the same time, Steve's shield bash continued to descend forcefully, pressing Kyle's body down in an instant, forcing him to kneel on the ground to support himself. Even the mud that he had pressed down on had an obvious dent. Kale suffered a big loss when facing the characteristics of the Aegis of Adaman for the first time. Chapter 36. How's this move? Steve held the round shield with both hands. Adding his own weight, he wanted to crush Kale. Not bad. Kale responded with difficulty. His left shoulder was firmly pressed against the shield. One of his knees and his right palm were pressed into the mud. Steve wanted to use the shield to press him to the ground. Kale wanted to push the shield away and resist. The game between the two had completely turned into a tug-of-war of pure strength. "Kale, admit defeat," Steve said solemnly. He began to pour all his strength into his hands to press down. The shield was lowered bit by bit. After all, he had the upper hand. In terms of pure strength, Steve believed that he was not inferior to Kale. It's not that simple. Kale clenched his teeth and held on. He maintained his shield position without the slightest wavering. The shield was lowered, in fact, it was only the collapse of the mud. Although he was wearing a tight black combat suit, the muscles on his body were clearly bulging. His right hand, which was supporting the ground, had at some point clenched into a fist. The golden sunlight shone on Kale's steel-like body. At this time, he was like a bronze statue that represented strength. Under the surprised cries of the group of American soldiers and Steve's incredulous gaze, the shield pressing down on Kale quickly rose back up inch by inch. "You want me to admit defeat?" "That's far from enough." Kale pushed Steve's shield away and took a few steps back. He was a little exhausted as he gasped for breath. "But now, you're almost out of strength." Steve's eyes held a complicated expression. Kale had used all his strength to push the shield away. This had indeed won him a chance to turn the situation around. At the same time, it had also forced him into a desperate situation. Steve continued, "Your attack has no effect on this shield." "Steve, you haven't forgotten, have you?" Kale suddenly laughed and said, "I haven't even used my weapon yet, and you think you've already won?" With that said, Kale reached behind him, grabbed the hilt with his left hand, and pulled out the sodium-carbon sword. Compared to Ardman's shield, which was painted with colorful patterns, the sodium-carbon sword was a simple one-handed sword. Its smooth, mirror-like blade gave off a suffocating sense of sharpness. Although close combat isn't bad, it's still too troublesome to rely on close combat to kill enemies on the battlefield. Kale said coldly, his left hand gripping his sword tightly. He still had green ability cards related to sword techniques. However, what was more important was not just the sword technique, but the sharpness of the carbon-sodium steel sword. Kyle's attack power could be increased by several levels in a straight line. Even if the weapons in his hands were carbon-sodium steel claws and carbon-sodium steel blades, they would not be that bad. As long as he had a sharp enough weapon, Kale would be able to achieve a one-hit kill. At that moment, at the outermost edge of the crowd of soldiers, Joseph looked at the two people holding weapons in the center of the area and suddenly walked quickly to Carter's side. "Agent Carter. Those two brats are playing for real now. If we don't stop them now, there might be an accident." Carter shook her head lightly, her beautiful eyes not moving from the field at all. "They're only playing for real now? Can't you see? They've been seriously trying to defeat each other all this time." Joseph asked in confusion, "What's going on?" "Their fight is also very sudden. Isn't it almost time for the White Star Project to set off?" "I'm just guessing." A complicated expression appeared in Carter's eyes. "Steve has been holding back a lot of energy for a long time and wants to vent it out. That's because no matter what he does, Kale can always be one step ahead of him and lead him forward. The qualification for the super soldier experiment, the Ardman shield, these were all indirectly given to him by Kale. Even so, Steve still feels that the gap between him and Kale is too far. He doesn't even feel confident in his title of Captain America. Maybe he's questioning himself in his heart, if he has better opportunities and weapons, why can he only curl up under Kale's protection? He also wants to be in front of Kale and hold up the shield for him. So, this time, as the captain, he's about to go to the enemy area to lead the soldiers in battle. Before that, Steve wants to regain himself and confidence in the battle with Kale. After Carter finished speaking, the fierce battle in the center of the area was also coming to an end. The sword and shield fiercely collided, and there were no sparks due to the kinetic energy dissipation. Only the crisp sound of iron striking echoed clearly in the square. After the sword strike and the shield respectively dissipated, the two men brushed past each other's shoulders and still punched each other's body with their fists. Kale and Steve flew out, rolled a few times on the ground, and then quickly got up and fought again. Both of them were each other's best friends in this world, but they were also competitors. Each of them had their own pride and unyielding spirit. Both of them wanted to be in the forefront, and the winning era would be more of a stage and focus. Under the sun, on the square, Kale and Steve, one holding a sword and the other holding a shield, finally charged at each other with a low roar. This shocking scene was frozen in the eyes and minds of more than 1,000 American soldiers at the base. Half a century later, it was still as clear as yesterday. And even half a century later, this scene would be sculpted by the most accomplished sculptor in front of the War Memorial Hall. Bang! The carbon-sodium steel sword flew high, and after spinning countless times in the air, it stabbed into the mud not far behind Steve. Steve still maintained his posture of wielding the shield, and Kale flew out heavily, plowing a clear mark on the ground. In the end, he lay on the ground, tired and motionless. "Captain Steve?" The soldiers were ready to cheer for the winner, but at that moment, Steve raised his hand, exhausted. "I lost." On his neck, there was a clear line of blood on the side. It looked like a small wound, but blood kept dripping from it. "I'm really tired." Cale struggled to get up and patted the dust off his body. The final decisive blow was not his sword falling out of his hand, but he took the initiative to take a shield attack and threw the sword as a hidden weapon. If he hadn't held back, Steve would have been beheaded. "Cale, you used all your strength, didn't you?" Steve covered his wound and panted, looking straight at Cale, wanting an answer. Cale paused for a moment, then nodded. "That's right." Although he still had stealth and vibranium arm guard that he hadn't used, Steve was already the most difficult and powerful opponent he had ever met. "Is that so?" Steve nodded with satisfaction, clenching his fists with determination. "I'll let you go first this time, but one day, I'll walk ahead of you. Otherwise, I'll be letting you down. Then I'll wait and see." Cale smiled faintly, looking around at the soldiers around him. After taking a breath, he said coldly, "Are you ready? Follow us to the battlefield and destroy the enemy." "Ready." The loud response resounded through the entire base. The 500 American soldiers stood up with a whoosh, looking fervently at the two people in the innermost circle. "Then take your weapons and follow our footsteps." Steve gave the order loudly, and the 500 soldiers gathered together immediately gripped the guns in their hands and collectively opened up a path. After this battle, the two were covered in wounds, but their prestige was several times stronger than before the battle, and the morale of the troops was unprecedentedly high. "Then what are we waiting for? Let's go." Cale and Steve gave the order, and the two of them took the lead and rushed out of the base, leading the troops out. Looking at this scene, Joseph said in surprise, "These two people might be able to change the situation of the war." Chapter 37. More than a month later. New York, Brooklyn, Highland Street. The winter pedestrian streets gradually became lively under the morning sun. It was just after Christmas, and the new year was about to come. Although it was in the war stage of World War II, New York, a major European city, was still not affected by the smoke of war. In the winter morning, people in coats hurried on the streets, busy with their jobs and livelihoods. From time to time, some children in hoods could be seen holding a stack of black and white newspapers, walking quickly on the crowded streets and shouting, "The latest New York Times." Major Cale and Lieutenant Steve led the troops to destroy the German fortress base again. The Wall Street Journal. Two American heroes fought brilliantly again, and the German front line retreated 20 miles due to lack of resources. The iron-blooded officer who won every battle and turned the tide of the war. Today I will explain to you the enemy of 10,000 people, Major Cale's glorious path. The newspapers during this period were basically the first to print and publish the war reports on the front line, not to mention the news of victory. Once it was released, it would be snatched up by the citizens. The boy selling newspapers, whose face was red from the cold, bought 2 stacks of newspapers in just half an hour on the street where the cold wind howled. It turned out that even if World War II did not affect New York on the surface, it was enough to make people worry about the UA troops on the front line and hope and pray that they could end the war as soon as possible. "Can I have one?" A blonde girl wearing a purple scarf smiled and waved gently at the boy selling newspapers running across the street. The boy immediately trotted over, took the change, and put the last newspaper in his hand into the girl's basket. He opened his eyes wide and looked at the girl's angel-like delicate face. He couldn't help but praise, "Big sister, you are so beautiful. You have a sweet mouth." The blonde girl's beautiful eyes curved into crescents, and her warm smile seemed to melt the snow around her. This made many gentlemen passing by on the street bump into the streetlights. "It's time to go home." Lucy exhaled a breath of cold air, elegantly holding the basket of vegetables and newspapers, and began to walk back home. Although it was called home, it was actually just the house where Cale used to live. Located at 199 Highland Street, it was a classic European-style duplex villa with a balcony garden. Lucy took off her boots and entered the house. There was a heater in the house, so the temperature was much warmer than outside. She took off her cotton coat, revealing her graceful figure that the sweater couldn't hide. After placing the basket on the table, Lucy changed her elegant and dignified appearance. She excitedly took out several newspapers from the basket and spread them out on the table. The newspapers all had headlines and pictures, and the main characters in the headlines of these newspapers were poles apart. It was either a stern young man who was commanding with a round shield, or a cold young man in black who was charging towards the enemy with a long sword in his hand. Below the picture in the newspaper, there was a detailed description of the person. Steve Rogers, 23 years old, Captain America, First Lieutenant. The first battle of Captain Steve's life was when he and Major Cale went deep into the third area behind enemy lines, broke through the factory base, rescued 500 American prisoners, and successfully broke out of the encirclement. He called himself Captain America and always rushed to the front with a shield. He led the team of soldiers to take down 5 German factory bases in a month, minimizing the casualties on his side. He was a patriot, a super soldier, and the embodiment of a hero who symbolized American justice. Lucy quickly browsed through Steve's profile, and her beautiful eyes anxiously fell on the other side, on a longer and more cumbersome profile. Cale Adolph, 23 years old, the youngest major in history. Seeing this, Lucy showed a satisfied sweet smile. Her lips opened slightly, and she read Cale's profile. Major Cale is the youngest person in the history of the United States to hold the rank of major. In the first counterattack battle, he infiltrated the enemy base with a huge difference in numbers of 1 to 100, annihilated the German commander and the main forces, and successfully won the opportunity to reverse the situation on the front line. So far, Major Cale has led the marching troops to battle and ended in complete victory, often with extraordinary feats of one person fighting against an entire enemy team. According to incomplete statistics, the number of enemies killed under his name has exceeded 10,000, and he is a true enemy of 10,000. He is a hero who represents the strength of the United States. He was a war maniac that struck fear into the hearts of the German army. His nicknames were Devil and Dick, translated as Demon and Killing God. The latest news is that the President of the United States has awarded Major Cale the Medal of Honor. After reading it smoothly in one breath, Lucy's face was flushed with joy. Although such reports praising Cale were frequently published during this period, she would always buy such newspapers and read them day after day. A few months ago, he was just a recruit who broke into the enemy base, and he became a major so quickly. A hero who represents the strength of the United States, humph. Lucy pouted her pink lips. She was really under a lot of pressure now. Not to mention New York, even the young women of the entire United States were infatuated with the cold young man in front of her in the newspaper. After all, the movie screening rooms in some big cities would also show some battle records and propaganda films from the battlefield from time to time. And Cale and Steve could be said to be the main characters in the war documentaries in the past few months. The perfect posture of bravely killing the enemy, the powerful individual strength of one against many, and the young and handsome face were all shown. On the screen, the action of waving their arms or looking at the camera was enough to cause some young girls to scream fanatically. No matter what, I met Cale first. Little Lucy, you have to cheer up, there is no reason to lose to those women. Lucy secretly encouraged herself and curled up on the sofa, a bit like a woman waiting for her husband to return. Finally, she muttered bitterly, it's almost the new year, I don't know when Cale will come back. At this time, hundreds of miles away from New York, in the Glacier Mountains in the enemy's rear area. Below, a rugged train track was laid out from the mountainside to the distance. There were snow-capped peaks everywhere, the cold wind was fierce, and snowflakes were falling. On one of the snow-capped peaks, a group of dozens of U.S. soldiers wrapped in military coats were lurking, listening to intelligence messages from the rear base through monitoring instruments. Fry said with certainty, it has been confirmed that there is an important figure of the Hydra organization on the train that is about to pass, a newly appointed middle-aged German scientist, Warner terse. "Okay, let's get on the train. This time we only got prisoners, so we don't need so many people." Kale said quickly, looking at Steve next to him. Steve nodded. "Me, you, and Baki will go. The three of us are good at fighting alone, no matter how many guards there are on the train, we are not afraid." "Okay." Kale nodded in agreement. In fact, he was not afraid of danger if he went alone. Kale, Steve, Baki. Chapter 38. On the railway surrounded by snowy mountains, the sound of an old train's whistle echoed in the air above the snowy peaks. A long steel chain hung from the peak of the mountain, spanning 100 meters. The other end of the chain was tied to the mountainside of the opposite snowy mountain. The bottom of the chain was facing the sky above the railway. "It should feel like a swing," Kale shrugged and stood at the edge of the peak, his hands grasping the iron hoop that slid down the chain. Steve reminded him, "Be careful. If we miss the 10-second window, we'll all be killed by the train." "Okay, I'll find the right time." Baki nodded. He obviously didn't have the extraordinary physique of a super soldier, so he carried an energy gun as a weapon to kill the enemy. "Guys, get ready." Fry had been observing with his binoculars the whole time. When he saw the tracks of the enemy train below the lens, he raised his voice and said, "It's very fast, get ready, 3, 2, 1, go." As soon as Fry gave the order, Kale jumped off the peak, grabbed the hoop, and quickly slid down the ropeway. Steve and Baki quickly followed behind him. Whoosh! The cold wind mixed with snowflakes blew in his face. Kale, dressed in black, broke through the wind and snow. He watched the front of the train sweep past him at high speed. He let go of his hands and landed on the roof of the middle of the train. Thud thud. Steve and Baki also landed on the roof of the train. The train continued to move at high speed. Next to the tracks was the bottom of the snowy mountain valley. The hundreds of meters of drop was terrifying. "Kale, how do you want to move?" Steve asked out of his understanding of Kyle. He knew that even though he was a major, he still preferred to fight alone in a battle like this. "It's very simple. I'll enter from the middle of the train and attract the attention of the enemy guards. You two go to the front of the train and capture the target alive." Kale didn't wait for Steve's response. He quickly climbed down from the side of the train, twisted the handlebars, and forced his way through the door. Kale had only entered the train for a few seconds when the warning broadcast of an invasion, the sound of energy weapons exploding, and the tragic screams of the enemy soldiers came from inside the train. Baki on the roof of the train shook his head. "It's really simple and crude as always. Let's go." Steve, on the other hand, was used to it. He waved to the front, lowered his body, and used the roof as a passageway to approach the front of the train. In the middle of the train, under the bright light of the train, 5 fully armed German guards' bodies lay cold on the floor of the train. Some of their hands were directly cut off, some were cut off at the waist, and the better ones had their hearts pierced. Several energy weapons glowing with blue light were stained with blood and scattered on the ground. Most of the German guards didn't even have time to use these high-end weapons on the intruders before they lost their life force. Drip, Kale's face was cold and expressionless. His left hand held the long sword that was dripping with blood. The vibranium arm guard on his right hand was still smoking. His leather military boots slowly stepped on the scarlet and sticky pool of blood. He looked around at the piles of supplies in the train. Suddenly, he sensed something and raised his head to look at the corner of the train. There was a surveillance camera with a weak red light. "Have you noticed me?" Kale's mouth curved into a cold smile. He lowered his body and picked up an energy pistol glowing with blue light from the ground. He aimed, pulled the trigger, and a small blue laser shot out from the muzzle. The surveillance camera turned into dust. On the other side of the surveillance camera was the main driver's cabin of the train. A bald, bespectacled, middle-aged professor and the train driver's eyes showed a genuine fear that came from the depths of their souls. The executioner is really here. We are dead, dead. The guards on the train can't stop him. The train driver's mouth seemed to be frozen, and his voice was constantly trembling and out of tune. Major Kale of the U.S. Army was not only famous in the U.S., but also in Germany. But this reputation was built on the bodies of thousands of German soldiers. The German army hated Kale to the core. They even wanted to send bombers to the front line to destroy him. He was like a nightmare that haunted the hearts of the Germans. Even the bravest and most iron-blooded soldiers would be afraid when they heard the name, Kale, before they even fought. Shut up. Send more guards to guard the main driver's cabin. The bald professor slapped the driver's face and looked at the surveillance screen. A crazy emotion appeared in his eyes under his glasses. He whispered, "Come on, you came just in time. Even if I die this time, I will drag you to hell with me." After destroying the surveillance camera, Kale looked around in the carriage and began to draw cards to search for supplies. The reason why he liked to fight alone was that he had too many secrets about cards and didn't want to expose too much to others, even if the other party was Steve. Secondly, only by fighting alone would one be able to encounter good quality enemy supplies and draw cards from them. Especially with the Hydra organization developed independently in Germany, after they started to create new energy weapons, many military weapons reached the quality of blue item cards. Rechargeable laser gun, enhanced energy pistol, gem energy, within 3 meters of Kale, all the blue item cards that could be drawn were directly reflected in his vision. There is a box of gem energy, Kale blinked in surprise. This was an unexpected gain. A box of gem energy often contained nearly 25 blue item cards. Sometimes, when attacking a base factory, one might not even find half a box of gem energy cubes, which were used as raw energy materials. Steve and Baki, these two should be able to easily take care of the guard in the driver's cabin. Kale whispered softly, but his mind didn't stop. At the rate of 1 gem energy cubes per 3 seconds, he converted all the energy cubes in the box into cards and stored them in the card space. For more than a minute, no enemy guards came to interrupt the rhythm of drawing cards. Kale finished drawing and was about to stand up when the train suddenly shook violently, causing him to stagger and almost fall to the ground. What's going on? Kale frowned, quickly opened the carriage door, and poked his head out to look at the front of the train. He saw a huge gap in the front of the train. Thick smoke billowed out of the driver's cabin, and red flames could be seen flickering. You're tuning in to the Xiaofan's Wuxia Tales YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.